Looks like we have a packed house tonight. Thank you very much. We have a bunch of things to go on, so let's get started. First, we'll start with a motion to return to public session. Can I get a motion?
Move. Second.
Second. Okay, thank you. Call to order. Opening statement. Meeting of the board are open to the public and all members of the community should feel free to participate. There are two opportunities for the public to speak. The first is at the beginning of the meeting for agenda items only, and the second is at the end of the meeting for other items. Any individual desiring to speak shall give his or her name, address, and a group, if any, that is represented. The presentation shall be as brief as possible, but no more than 3 minutes per individual. There are certain matters that may be brought before the board that cannot be immediately addressed in public. Such matters may be referred by the president to a board committee and or to the superintendent for consideration and or resolution. The board vests in its president or other presiding officer authority to terminate the remarks of any individual if he or she deems it's in the best interest of those present to do so. Can we have a roll call?
Mr. Reddy.
Present.
Mr. Wall.
Here.
Mrs. Briamonte.
Here.
Mrs. Zhang.
Here.
Dr. Kalor.
Here.
Mrs. Ticello.
Here.
Mr. Buckley.
Here.
Mr. Damari.
Here.
Mr. Mann is absent. We have a quorum.
Can we all rise for a flag salute? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And
to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so we have 4 presentations tonight. As you can see, everyone's in the audience. If everyone's wondering who everyone else is, you have the high school robotics team, the WR Stats girls basketball team. We have a presentation to a individual student, and we have the high school swim team if everyone sees them. So Dr. Cascone, if you want to.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy. And good evening, everyone. And we appreciate you making the accommodations with the space. Our auditorium is in use. We know it's close quarters, but we appreciate you coming tonight, and we're really looking forward to recognizing these outstanding students, athletes, scholars. At this time, Mr. Reddy, would you join me at the podium? Thanks, sir. Okay, so the first is Ariel Borges here? Ariel, are you here? Come on up. So Ariel is you're a senior? A senior, come on around. So Ariel's a senior at Holmdel High School. She is not just an aspiring filmmaker, she already is an award-winning filmmaker. And we brought her here tonight to recognize her for winning the South Jersey Regional Scholastic Gold Key Award for her complete social impact film portfolio. Do you mind if I put you on the spot and talk a little bit about your work? Okay, please. You can do a much better job than I can.
Sure. So I started out with an interest in filmmaking in kind of 7th grade, but decided to pursue it once I got to high school and started really working in the TV Society and being really involved in the news program here. And so that kind of gave me the step in and kind of the push to go forward because I saw that I was good at this. Like I was able to edit, and Mr. DiNovellis helped me a lot with that. So then in sophomore going into junior year, I did my first summer program and did another summer program after that, and have just been continuously making films. So I've really just like had the support from the school and just everyone around me, really. So
About a round of applause. Board President Reddy will present you with the certificate. Now, Ariel, when you win an Oscar, don't forget us, okay? Please. Okay, our next group, I'm gonna ask them to come up when I call the team. So where are our robotics teams? Where are the robotics folks? Come on up. Robotics team members and coach, come on up. So we have two different teams represented. We have Team Silver. Raise your hand if you're on Team Silver. That's hence the shirts. Okay, very good. And the other team is blue. Again, got it. They're smarter than I am, clearly. As you know, we've and Mr. Bocino, they're fearless advisors. So as you know, the school district has been from the $40 million referendum to the facilities and the programs and the curriculum under Ms. McConnell's leadership, and obviously with some truly outstanding teachers and students. We've continued to build an outstanding robotics program. And I have to tell you, folks, I was so excited when I heard that you had won. Next time, just let me know. I'll come out and support you. I like to come to all the events. So now we have a spokesperson from the group. Who's the spokesperson for the group? Student spokesperson. Very good. So tell us a little bit about the competition, and then maybe a little bit about the work that you did to win your awards.
Hello, I'm team captain of Team Hornet Silver. And across both teams, basically the competition that we compete in involves building an 18 by 18-inch robot that can complete a series of tasks that mostly involve turning rotational motion into linear motion. So we're using a lot of servos and like DC motors and turning them into slides. And the robot's able to complete a series of simple tasks. This year, the challenge was about picking up cones and placing them on poles. And the games have a lot of different elements with a lot of different points involved, but that's kind of the gist. And this class has just been really fulfilling, I think, for everyone across both teams, because there's a lot of classes in which you're doing group work, sure, but this is really a class where your group work is given out in like a physical product at the end. Everyone feels accomplished because at the end in that competition, there's something physically on that robot that you've been working on for months, and you get to see it come to fruition and really go to work. So it's just been an amazing experience. And I think it was really our teamwork together across both teams, just bouncing ideas back and forth. Our older members were able to help mentor our younger members. And when it comes to learning things like computer programming and just building physically, you know what I mean? It's a lot of metal work. So I think our teamwork was really our key to winning here. And I'm just so glad that this class has been up and running for so long.
Folks, I think you should retain her service as the spokesperson, and she did a heck of a job there. So Mr. Reddy, board president, is going to present you with the certificates. I'm going to read the names. First from Team Hornet Silver, Zhu Chen. No, it's okay. Praneeth Damarla. Faiz Nazir. Okay. William Su. Ruhi Walia. Okay, that's it. So that's Team Silver. A round of applause for Team Silver. Yeah. Team Blue, John King. Brian Pohl. Finley Torrens. Aiden Karskadden. Arthur Ortiz. Kyle Piscopo. Kyle Piscopo? Yep. James Snell. James Snell. And last but not least, their fearless advisor, Mr. Bochan. Like also to call up Mrs. McConnell, who oversees the engineering, the technology and engineering department, to come up and join us for a picture. You're going to take a picture? You ready? Robotics.
No longer in a baseball.
I wasn't in Mr. Zhang's house, yeah. All right. Now, since they've been waiting patiently out there, let me have the undefeated Run for the Roses champions, middle school girls basketball team. Coming up, girls. Come on up. Come on, jog it out here. There you go, girls. Good evening. Welcome. Now, let me tell you, they came out here to sort of slowly, but if you saw them play like I did, particularly in the first half of the semifinal game against St. Rose, let me tell you something. That was as impressive a half of basketball that I've seen any team play. The press, the team defense, and the finishing was unbelievable. When I saw that first half, I'm like, this team's going all the way. And they did. I was there to watch them win the championship as well. So girls, we are so incredibly proud of you. That is an amazing achievement. Perfection is not easy. I mean, and being a champion is not easy. It takes dedication, hard work day after day, and that's a long season. Where's Coach Bailey at? Oh, there you are. Hey, and it takes, yeah, how about Coach? What do you say? Hey, Coach, I mean, and it takes takes great coaching. So girls, this is an achievement that you'll have your entire life. You'll never forget it. You'll never forget, no matter where you go, where you play, you will never forget this team and this season. It was special. And I was glad that I was able to see it happen and be a part of it. So thank you. Round of applause. And now the names, which actually I don't have. All right, appreciate it. Nice shirts, by the way. Where's the superintendent get a shirt like that? That's okay. All right, Daniela Bavaro. Congratulations. Addison Bogan. Rianne Buchan. Ryan Buchanan. I said, how bad did I mess it up? She goes, pretty bad. Maeve Flaherty. Claire Gillespie. Christiana Ishak. Congratulations. Emma Lynn. Congratulations. Caitlin Ing. Congratulations. Alexa Pellegrino. Congratulations. Tatum Sharp. Congratulations. Season Yan. Congratulations. How about our managers? I didn't mention the managers. Managers are an important part of the team. Absolutely. Do we have any managers? Sonny Betts. Is Sonny here? Oh, yeah. Well, you play and you manage? Wow, that's even more impressive. That's even more impressive. And then we have Ava Beelan. Who's also so player. That's impressive. 2 roles. And then we have Coach Heather Bailey. Come on up, Coach. Heck of a job. Oh, we have. Oh, we actually have some more players. Okay, you really did put them in alphabetical order. Quinn Smigeliski. All right, tell me. Quinn Smigelski. She was nicer about correcting me. Logan Tivan. Congratulations. Jenna Yaznowski. And last but not least, Casey Zamet. Casey. All right, let's do a picture. Mr. Laughlin, come in, Mr. Casale, you want to get a picture? Okay. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Coach, congratulations. All right, we have one more big recognition tonight at the boys swim team in the house. Come on, boys. I know you're fast. I saw you in the pool. Come on up. All right. Okay. Okay. So last, but certainly not least, our Holmdel High School boys swim team. What a season. I mean, a season for the record books individually as a team. I had the privilege of watching you swim a couple times. Most notably, I was there when you won the sectional championship up in where was that? Perth Amboy? Yeah, up in Perth Amboy. Man, guys are fast. But what really amazed me about this team was, watching you interact at the pool. Is the camaraderie and the teamwork and the brotherhood that I saw between you was really impressive. And obviously, even though you're talented swimmers, I would argue that what enabled you to achieve at the high level you did was the level of teamwork and camaraderie and brotherhood that you had amongst the team. So gentlemen, we are super proud of you. You should be proud of yourselves. It's not a season you won't forget soon. And look, we're continue to look forward to good things in the future. Right? I look forward to getting some more hardware if you wouldn't mind accommodating me on that one. And special thanks to Assistant Coach Nora Bosmans. Coach, you guys did a great job. Obviously, coaches are a big part of the success, and we appreciate everything. You did all those hours in the pool. I mean, I spent about an hour in that pool. Where was that? Over the small one in South Amboy. I was like, man, they're here for hours. And I couldn't stand it for more than an hour, and there was like a sauna. But without further ado, we are going to read the names here. Okay, starting off, Adam Azawi. We'll go here, congratulations, man. Daniel Belikov. John Chang. Brandon Cheng. Matthew Elsayeg. Give it to me. Oh, okay, good. Harrison Ing. Sean Flanagan. James Garcia. Bryce Gestrick. Christopher Hall. Skylar Kang. Jeffrey Kelly. Nathan Koenig. Akarsh Kalu. Hunter Kunsel. Grant Lynn. Gregory Lynn. Debdeep Mazumder. Jason Milgram. Mark Milgram. Brian Pohl. Andrew Sellinger. Elvin Ty. Ethan Ty. Andrew Wang. None of the managers are here. Mina Liang, Marissa's, okay. And we had three managers, Mina Lang, Marissa Zhu, and Victoria Gork. And then I think we have a certificate in there for Coach Bosman's as well. Okay, very good. So another round of applause for our state championship swim team, sectional championship swim team. All right. Now, my understand, do we have any gentlemen that are swimming next year in college? We have any college swimmers? I thought I heard maybe have some college swimmers. Maybe. Okay. We'll want to hear about that. All right, let's get a picture. Yes, and right, and not in, thank you, sir. Well said. And not in attendance tonight, but head coach I'm sorry. Ms. Brennan, Brianna Brennan, and who is now a new mother along with Coach Bosman. So we congratulate them on that as well. All right, let's see the picture, guys. And that concludes the recognition portion of the agenda. Thank you to all those who came out. Wishing you a good evening and congratulations to all again.
Welcome back. Thanks everyone for staying. Have a good night. So, thank you, Dr. Cascone. All right, so I guess we can, Mr. Petrizzo, should we start with the CAFRA? Are we ready for that, or should we bounce down to the ethics training? Gentlemen.
What's the line never filed with Children and Animal Act?
All right, we're ready for the 2021-2022 annual comprehensive financial report and single audit from PFK Connor Davies LLP. So if you got gentlemen want to come to the mic and do your thing, I believe you guys come every year, don't you? If I recall correctly, I remember some things. So if you want to do your thing, thank you for coming tonight. And the rest of the board, this is our I guess annual CAFRA, what do you call it, right? Is that the acronym?
Yeah, they actually changed it to AFRA now. Long story now, but the state changed the acronym. We don't even ask long story. So a couple open remarks. First of all, congratulations to all your students. We're watching in the hallway. That was very nice to see. Just a quick comment on the timeline. Historically, the statutory deadline was always December 5th. Due to delays at the state, we're kind of at the mercy at the state. By the time they get their pension information and OPEB information, which was available end of February, they extended the deadline to March 17th. And that has been met. Everything's filed, everything's complete at this point. So you're all good there and you're certain are compliant. Secondly, like always, we always receive excellent cooperation from Michael, Jessica, Teresa, the whole finance office, quite frankly, everybody in the district, and we really appreciate it. And just remember, it's not a an audit just at finance office. We go over transportation, student services, food service. We do testing at the individual schools. And with that being said, it's very important to have a strong internal control environment. And I can honestly say this district has just that. I mean, incredible internal controls. And that's something we always take a deep dive in. We really like to, we feel like if we're going to find anything, that's the area we like to go in. And like I said, really exercise excellence. And that was further seen in this year's AMR, which had no findings at all. So congratulations, Michael and the entire team on that. So like I said, this year with all the different COVID grants and every year seems like even for us, we're doing additional testing. And again, had no findings at all. And that's something I think to be proud of. And with that, obviously you had a non-modified opinion, both on the financial statement level and on the grants, single audit. And that's the best opinion a school district can get. So again, congratulations on that. And just to touch base on some of the numbers, I was just going to go over a couple of highlights, but certainly if you guys want to ask any questions, I'll go as deep as you guys wanted to anything. We have the books right here. So, I mean, a couple of years ago, I think you guys had to pivot to remote learning with all the COVID stuff, obviously. And I think this was even a tough year. It was the first full year back to in-person learning. With that came additional transportation costs, tuition costs, et cetera. And I think, as of June 30th, 2022, this is what this audit was. I mean, the district, still landed in pretty outstanding financial condition. A couple years ago, the enterprise funds incurred losses because of COVID. This year it bounced back. Food service fund balance was $220,000. That was up $55,000 from the prior year. And that was obviously due to increase in daily sales. You got some more federal grants for the, oh, sorry, Michael, I actually don't get the federal grants. That was almost strictly driven by the daily sales revenue. And, similarly with the child care program, that was $210,000 in that position, and that was up $25,000. And again, that was driven just by a spike in the tuition revenue. As far as the general funds, I think you landed in really solid position. Your unassigned general fund balance was just over $3 million. It was $3,024,684. That pretty much represents your available 4%. And something the state did over the last 2 years, they let you keep 4%, which historically was always a 2%. And that is going back to 2% effective for the June 30th, 2023 fiscal year end. So just something to keep in mind. Your reserves are also in pretty healthy condition. I mean, the capital reserve is $2,001,000 to be used for future capital reserve projects. Your maintenance reserve is $2,187,492 to be used for future maintenance projects, or what the district tends to utilize some of that in the future year's budget. So again, I was trying to keep it brief, but again, if you have any questions, certainly we love to answer them.
Any board members, any questions? Comments? I'll say something, sitting here a number of years, and every year you guys come around this time, February, March, kudos to Mike and the business office and the ABA and the other people that work in the office. No findings every year. I mean, I can't go back to a year, from the last decade that we've had findings. So it's definitely a strong point in this district. It enabled us to do, I could say, the referendum. It was probably a big driver that made us to do it on a lower tax base and, AAA rating and everything like that. And even this year, I don't know if Mike discussed with you, challenging budget. And thank God for a cap reserve and a maintenance reserve. Obviously, no idea what next year is going to be, but at least we have that ability to use some of it to help defray some of the healthcare costs and the transportation costs. So, thank God we do, because otherwise we'd be asking the voters for more tax money or going out for referendum to pass a budget. And, we haven't done that in well over a decade here. So.
Well said. And, there's other school districts, even similar size, that are in that situation.
Yeah.
So it's important to have conservative spending practices, which the district does outside of the fixed costs. Like you just mentioned, the health benefits, which are rising out of control, transportation, same issue. So yeah, you have a nice little cushion there.
Well, I see no comments or questions. Thank you for coming. Thanks for the update, and appreciate no findings.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
That was easy. Thanks for making that easy each year. Guess the Board of Ethics training, Mr. Green. And this is the training, if everyone remembers from last month, that we didn't have time, so we pushed it to this month. And this is an annual thing we have to do every year. And I think in your packet, you should have the little presentation. And I think there's a
you have
document for
remote or
signature
you-
again. Yeah.
Is there a remote or he's just gonna do it? Good evening. So can we move some of that out of the way there on the side panel? There we go. Thanks. So let's talk about the School Ethics Act because we have to talk about the School Ethics Act. We're required to do it every year. The purpose of the School Ethics Act is basically the legislature has ruled that it's essential that the conduct of members of boards of education and the administrators hold the respect and confidence of the people, must avoid conduct which is in violation of the public trust or which creates a justifiable impression among the public that the trust is being violated. And hopefully eventually this will respond. It's on. There we go. Okay, just takes its time responding. All right, so who does the act apply to, or to whom does the act apply? It applies to all of the board members. It applies to managerial employees or officers of the School Boards Association and school administrators, which is basically anyone holding a chief school administrator, business administrator, principal certificate, as well as any employees that have direct responsibility for recommendation of purchasing of supplies or hiring, recommendations of hiring. The Code of Ethics in the Act, which is a separate part of the statute, only applies to board members. So only board members are governed by the Code of Ethics. We are reviewing this tonight because under the regulations, we must annually discuss both the School Ethics Act and the Code of Ethics. And that has to occur at a regularly scheduled public meeting as we're doing tonight. So we have the School Ethics Act, which has basically two sections in Title 18A. First one are essentially what we can think of as prohibited acts. They are the thou shalt nots. Those are the conflict of interest provisions. And you will find these basically all spelled out in your policy 0142, your bylaw. Section 2, which only applies again to board members, is the Code of Ethics. So among the Section 1 prohibitions, these are the ones that prohibit a board member from having a conflicting interest in a business organization or having any business transaction or professional activity in substantial conflict with the proper discharge of the duties. So no financial conflict of interest doing business with the board, for example, or the district. You may not use or attempt to use your position to secure unwarranted privileges, advantages, or employment for oneself, members of the immediate family, or others. Acting in your official capacity in any matter where you have, or a business organization which you have an interest, has a direct or indirect financial involvement that might reasonably be expected. It's a very broad standard, a reasonable expectation that it might impair your objectivity. Also, you may not represent any person or party other than the board or district in connection with any matter. There is an exception to that. You can represent your own child. If you're dealing with something as a parent, you have the right to do that. You just have to remember that you are always going to be viewed as a board member. So you have to be very careful to restrict your conduct to that of a parent, essentially, and not of a board member. The Code of Ethics is a separate provision that basically codifies a variety of ethical provisions that were originally adopted by the School Boards Association. The first one is you're obligated to uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulations of the State Board of Education, as well as all court orders. The second one is the critical, really probably the overriding one, which is why you are all here, because your constituency, the reason you're on this board is you are here for the welfare of the children of this district. That is first and foremost your primary mission, and that is your constituency, and that you will seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children, regardless of ability, race, creed, color, sex, or social standing.
chapter or section C follows with respect to that, because the Board of Education is a policy-making, planning, and appraisal body. You do not run the schools. The schools are managed and run by your administration. You have a chief school administrator who is basically your CEO. You have a business administrator who runs the business operations. And the only individual that you have direct authority over in terms of supervision and responsibility is your chief school administrator, your superintendent of schools. Everything else flows through the chain of command through that. So you are not here to administer the district. You are here to confine your activity to board policymaking, planning, and appraisal, and frame policies and plans only after consulting with those who will be affected by them. So, board members, how do we formulate programs and methods to effectuate the goals of the school district? There are a number of methods. One is through committees, ad hoc or standing, discussion or action at a duly convened meeting. No board member has individual authority. You as a board only have authority when you are together at a public meeting or in a committee session where you are carrying out the functions of the board through the committees. So you have to be very careful in terms of directly directing administration to do anything. No individual board member has the authority to do that. That basically has to be done through committee structure. Go back one sec. That basically has to be a consensus from the board or from a committee in terms of charging the administration. And similarly, any requests from board members should really funnel through the board president because we don't want to have a situation where we have board members inundating administration with requests or particular recommendations or suggestions. There needs to be an orderly process to funnel all that through. D, your responsibility, again, is not to administer the schools. Your responsibility is, however, to see together with your board members that they are well run. That is your obligation. So you don't run the schools, the administration does, but you do oversee the operation of the district in the sense of making sure that they are well run. So again, direct orders should not be given to the administration, but the board itself or a committee may direct the administration to perform certain tasks, functions, study, analyses at any point, so long as they are consistent with policymaking, planning, and appraisal, and or those tasks are consistent with the board goals or the goals it sets for the CSA. Because two of the goal sets that you set are one for the board every year and one for the chief school administrator. So any task that you request of the administration should either be consistent with those goals or with other tasks consistent with policymaking, planning, and appraisal. In order to prove a violation in this area, there actually has to be a showing of a board member giving a direct order to school personnel or becoming directly involved in activities or functions that are the school personnel responsibilities or day-to-day administration. So for example, in one case, and we'll talk a little bit about the School Ethics Commission in a little bit, but the School Ethics Commission found a violation where a particular board member directly asked for copies of SAT reports from the guidance secretary, inspected lockers in the boys' locker room, and instructed staff on the supervision of students. You cannot go walking around the district looking to inspect facilities. Obviously, if you see something in the course of normal conduct in a building, you report that to the superintendent, but you don't take it upon yourself to basically take a tour, as this gentleman did, and start writing up problems that he sees with the locker rooms. That's not your function. We'll talk about what happens if complaints come in a little bit, because that's a separate section. You also have to be very careful about trying to bring vendors into the district to the attention of the administration. That's not really a board member role. You can make suggestions to the business administrator. He might want to, look at some of these avenues, but you have to be very careful about actually going out and trying to find particular vendors to provide services to the district. I will recognize that authority rests with the Board of Education, will make no personal promises nor take any private action. Again, you do not have any individual authority. The Board of Education has the authority, and you have to be very careful about not to make promises to members of the public because as an individual board member, you really cannot make any promises. Factual evidence of a violation of this under the rules of the SEC is evidence that the board member made personal promises or took action beyond the scope of his or her duties which had the potential to compromise the board. And we'll look at some cases a little later that talk to some of these. Next one is I will refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interest or partisan political groups or to use the schools for personal gain or the gain of friends. You basically have to maintain your own independent judgment and not be swayed by any outside influences. This is an extremely important one, probably one of the hardest areas that we find because it just tends to, for some reason, be difficult, but you must maintain confidentiality, super critical. Anything it's like the Las Vegas rule, anything that stays said in closed session stays in closed session. You have to hold anything confidential, which any matter, if it disclosed, would needlessly injure individuals or the schools. This further says that in all other matters, I will provide accurate information. There have been ethics cases where board members have gotten nailed on that, where they've basically put false or inaccurate information out into the public. And that has proved to be a violation of the ethics code. So anything you do disseminate, and we'll talk a little bit about why you shouldn't really be disseminating anything, but if you do put anything out there, it needs to be accurate. I will vote to appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of the recommendation of the chief school administrator. Other than the appointment of the superintendent, any other appointment that the board makes has to have the recommendation of the CSA. You can reject the CSA's recommendation. The statute says you cannot do so for arbitrary or capricious reasons. You need to have a valid reason to do so. And if you do, then you basically say to the CSA, come back to me with another candidate. And it's not one of those where you don't say, bring me 3 candidates. The superintendent makes one recommendation to you. If it gets voted down, superintendent can come back and recommend the same individual again, or can recommend somebody else. But you must appoint the best qualified personnel, and you must have the CSA's recommendation to do that. I will say there's one exception to that. The only exception is with a non-tenured teacher who the superintendent administratively non-renews. That teacher can ask for what's called a Donaldson hearing before the board. It comes from the case that it was involved in. If the board determines after that hearing that the teacher should be rehired, that's the one instance where the board has the right to override the superintendent's decision. That's the sole instance. The next one is I will support and protect school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. You never, ever really want to be in a position where you're criticizing any school personnel in public. If there are concerns with those should be brought through the superintendent, and that should be done basically as a personnel matter. That should not be done in public. Factual violation of this includes evidence that the board member took deliberate action, which resulted in undermining, opposing, compromising, or harming school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. That's a fairly broad category in terms of that. So you're here to support your administration, your teachers, your staff, and it's very important that you basically be behind them in that. Code of ethics provisions continue. I will refer all complaints to the CSA, Chief School Administrator, and will act on the complaints at public meetings only after failure of an administrative solution. Basically, if you get a complaint or if you have a complaint, that goes to the superintendent. The superintendent is the one who has to basically deal with that and then basically explain to you how the superintendent has resolved the situation. Code does not say how a complaint is to be referred. Basically, referral can be made by the board member directly to the chief school administrator, or you may direct the constituent who comes to you with a complaint to go directly to the CSA. You can also have them go through the chain of command. Ideally, if there's a concern with a teacher, for example, if the parent is having a problem with the teacher, the place to start is with the teacher and discuss that. If that's not satisfactory, then you move up to the principal and ultimately to the superintendent. But if anybody comes to you with a complaint, your really response has to be, I really can't deal with that. You really need to take that through the chain of command. Just so you're aware of it, we're not going to spend much time on this, but as most of you, I think, are aware, there is a provision. There are a variety of cases, and this chart comes from one of the advisory opinions from the Ethics Commission that talk about the scope of a board member's ability to participate in collective negotiations when the board member, a spouse, a member of the immediate family is employed in another school district where the statewide union represents that relative. So typically the NJEA represents not only individual teachers and the groups in our district, but in other districts as well. The main thing you need to be aware of here is if you do have a family member, and I would say for purposes of asking the question, any relative, ask the question, and you are potentially going to be involved in negotiations, you should make the basically the superintendent or the board attorney or the board president aware of that and ask whether or not that would be a conflict of interest for you to participate. Many of these situations, you cannot participate in negotiations, but once the final memorandum of agreement and salary guides are negotiated, at that point, you can no longer influence the deal. The theory is that if you have a relative in another district, if it's a close relative, you could be perceived as having a motivation to come in with a higher salary settlement here in Holmdel, in the hope that that would then lead to a higher salary settlement than the other district. That's the basic concept behind it. So we're not going to get into the real nitty gritty of it. You should also be aware that there are other situations. There's a nepotism policy that we have to have by law, which deals with employment, prohibition of employment of family members, of board members. We don't really need to get into all that too, but you just need to be aware that there are these potential conflicts out there, and you may have to flag those for us. So what are we talking about when we talk about an ethics complaint? Well, first of all, any person may file a complaint alleging a violation of the act or the code. There is a provision that the Ethics Commission has ruled that a Board of Education is not a person for that purpose, so a Board of Education cannot file an ethics complaint. There's a 6-month statute of limitations generally for filing complaints. There has been some interesting case law lately that indicates on a continuing violation allegation, they may not enforce that. The School Ethics Commission, it's a 9-member commission composed of a mix of school representatives, public representatives, and it can be no more than 5 individuals from any one political party. It's the only entity that can determine whether a school official's conduct violated the act. Boards of education have no ability to discipline or review the conduct of their members. It's strictly through the School Ethics Commission. Also, anyone can request an advisory opinion from the SEC about their own conduct or someone else's proposed course of conduct. These are very useful when you have a question of whether a particular course of conduct that you are interested in, for example, say there was a case where, can I chaperone my child's own trip as a board member? And the answer was yes, with certain caveats. You can request an advisory opinion from the SEC. They are, as it says, advisory. They're not binding upon anyone, but they are considered an indication of how the SEC would rule if this case were brought before them as an ethics complaint, and that basically protects you if you're following that particular opinion. So any school official may request that. You can request it about another official's conduct, in which case you must copy that official, and that official can file a response. Sanctions for violation of the act, the lowest level is a reprimand, which is essentially a private rebuke by the Commissioner of Education. Censure is a formal public approval with a formal resolution adopted and then actually read into the record at a board meeting and posted throughout the district. Suspension, the SEC has the authority to temporarily remove or suspend a board member for a period of time. And the most severe sanction is removal, which is rare, but does occasionally happen, where if it's severe enough, the SEC will actually remove the board member from the board. There's an indemnification provision in the board member statutes, which basically says that whenever a civil, administrative, criminal, or quasi-criminal action has been brought against any person for an act arising out of and in the course of the performance of the duties as a member, and that's been very broadly interpreted, then the Board of Education must defray all costs of defending the action, including counsel fees and expenses. That is typically done through our insurance. The insurance covers the costs of defending the appeal, subject to the deductible that the board has to pay. So this, it's a very rare situation where that's not considered arising out of the course of the board member's duties. Even though one may feel that the action itself was not appropriate or a violation of the Ethics Act, even if it's found to be a violation, under this indemnification provision, it still is very broad in terms of it still is ultimately typically found to arise under the statute in the course of performance of the the board member's duties. So let's talk about free speech a little bit. Board members have a First Amendment right to express themselves, but you may not disclose information which is inaccurate, confidential, which has the potential to compromise the board. And again, as I mentioned before, members should not publicly criticize staff. That's not one of the areas where you're considered to have a free speech right. You must not represent your personal opinion as the position of the board, and you must include in all formal expressions in which your affiliation is likely to be recognized, such as letters to government officials or newspapers. The statement must include that you are a member of the board, you are speaking as a private citizen, and the opinions expressed do not represent those of the Board of Education. Just briefly, there are really two official spokespersons in this district. The board president is the spokesperson for Board of Education matters. The superintendent is the spokesperson for district matters that don't directly involve particular Board of Education issue. Those two are the only individuals who are really authorized to issue communications on behalf of the Board of Education or the school district. So anything else that you put out there, you are putting it out there as a private citizen. You have a First Amendment right to do that, but you have to be very careful to identify it, that you are doing it as a private citizen, not as a board member, and that your actions or your particular opinion don't represent the opinion of the Board of Education. There's a sample disclaimer here, which you can use if you do put something out. It's very important that you have both of those provisions in there, both sentences. This case shows why. This was the Treston and Randolph Board of Education case. In that case, the board member wrote an op-ed, which a board member is entitled to do, endorsing candidates. But he used a lot of very broad language. He did have a disclaimer. He said, they're my own opinions. But he basically had multiple references to his position on the board, use of the term we and our, and he did not make clear that the opinions expressed were not those of the Board of Education. And it was found by the SEC that the op-ed created the appearance that the entire board had endorsed certain candidates, unwarranted advantage on those candidates, clearly outside the scope of respondents' duties as a board member. So there it was recommended that he be reprimanded. The SEC imposed a penalty of censure. The superintendent, or the commissioner rather, reduced it to a reprimand, since at least he had tried to represent the views as his own, but had not done so sufficiently. So another case, just to talk briefly, this was a situation where a board member received a message from a parent regarding an alleged incident that resulted in the discipline of a student. So this is a parent reaching out to a board member. Although it did not name the student, there were other identifiers. The board member forwarded the message via a social media platform to family members. It was a private group. It was not public. But one of the family members then forwarded it to others, and it made its way out to the internet. And once it got out there, everyone basically was able to identify who the student was. And here, this was a violation of the confidentiality provisions, even though this was not discussed in a board meeting or had not come directly to the board. This was a parent reaching out to the board member. The board member had violated confidentiality basically by forwarding the message, details of the incident and the resulting discipline, and information identifying the student were disclosed. The board member had used the personal email account. That was not relevant. Basically, anything you do, it doesn't matter what the source of it is that you use to put it out there. If it goes out, you're going to be responsible for it. So in this case, the penalty was upgraded to a censure. So any information that comes to you has to go to the superintendent and no one else, and not be essentially distributed. So let's talk about some recent cases that illustrate some of these. So the first question is, and I'm not going to have people guess, we'll just, think these to yourselves. So the question here is, was the violation of Code of Ethics, Section A, which is, I will uphold all laws, rules, and regulations. Was there a violation when the board members rejected the K-8 health and physical education curriculum, thereby leaving the district in non-compliance? And that was not a violation. That basically, in that particular case, the key is this was a technicality in a way, because what the Ethics Commission said is there has to be, in order to find a violation of Section A, there has to be a ruling from a court or from an administrative agency that you have violated some legal provision. And the Ethics Commission doesn't have the authority to make that finding. So they said in this case, there was no particular finding. They said, if you get one within 6 months, come back and we'll reconsider it. Well, physically, that's almost impossible to do. But the argument here was that, the board members that were accused of this said, well, we didn't refuse to adopt a curriculum. We had a problem with the particular one that was brought to us, and we said, come back with something, revised. But it turned on the technicality if there was no finding, and the Ethics Commission said, we don't make that determination. Next one, a board member violated section I of the code when he attributed the alleged poor reading results on teachers by stating, I know the conversation started with the high school ranking. We have to look at what's coming to our high school. If we're not doing what we need to do at the lower levels, we're going to continue to get these results. Are they students that have been in union since kindergarten? This is Union School District. There's something wrong with our teaching staff. That was not a violation because this was not a criticism of the teaching staff. The way this was worded was, it was a question. This basically is, where is this coming from? Are these students that have been in union? If they were, then this would be a problem. But they found here in this case that there was no specific criticism of identifiable teachers. There was no private action taken. It was basically a generalized question. Number 3, a board member violated sections I and G of the code when she shared a post on her personal Facebook page that casted the complainant, who was a substitute teacher, in a negative light. She alleged the substitute was removed from her position as a result of unspecified misconduct, which was not true, was not an accurate statement. And that was, at this point, this is a criticism, a direct criticism of a particular staff member. Not only was it a criticism in public, but it was also an untrue criticism. And this was found to be a violation of the act. Violation of section E of the code, question. During an executive session, a heated discussion ensued. At one point, the respondent turned to the complainant and said, do you want to get punched tonight? When the complainant asked respondent if she was threatening her, the respondent repeated, do you want to get punched tonight? And this was not held to be a violation. There was no direct threat made. The SEC did not certainly condone the comments and doesn't suggest that board members threatened to punch each other. But what they said was there was no really direct assault. She didn't have to be restrained. It didn't occur in public. There is a case that occurred where there was much more violent conduct in public, was held to be a violation of the Ethics Act, where they actually had to hold the board member back, and it was a threat to an individual in public. But they said this particular conduct, while you certainly don't condone it and should not occur, there's no private action. There's no violation of the Ethics Act itself. Board member violated sections B and E when at a board meeting, he asked the public to be mindful of proper decorum following a resident's use of profanity. And then he posted on Facebook, and please don't do this. Speaking as a private citizen, it felt like we were transported to Appalachia last night and the local dive bar closed early. So the patrons came to the board meeting. Everyone should have to wash their hair in jeans before they come up screaming and dropping the F-bomb. It was unsightly and nauseating. So that was not a violation. The Ethics Commission said that, again, while they certainly don't condone this type of speech, they said it's not our role to discipline a board member for this particular type of activity. That really is a judgment to be made by the voters of the community, whether you want that individual representing you. They said that here, again, there was no direct threat. There was no private action. There was no action taken that compromised the board itself. So they found that there was no direct violation of the act. But again, saying, condemning the particular speech and not condoning it, but saying this is outside of our jurisdiction in terms of that. Next one, a board president posted a blog which commented about a teacher in the district, implying she received the job due to her brother's political activities. She was unqualified, did not want to resolve contract negotiations. So obviously she was involved in the association negotiations team. Posted pictures of the street where she lived, referred to her as a greedy bastard, and implied she was a bully. Well, that's an easy one. That is probably about as extreme as you're going to get in terms of someone basically really going after a staff member to the nth degree. I'll refrain from commenting on the municipality that it's in. So section E of the code, was it violated when a board member replied to a parent? Basically what happened was the parent had concerns, a teacher on the teacher's social media post showed she was in Cancun. This teacher had previously spoken at a board meeting. This was during the whole masking issue with the pandemic. She had gotten up at a board meeting and talked about how the school staff returning to in-person instruction was not safe. Basically the board member replied to the parent and stated that he was appalled by the teacher's behavior and the parent could expect a proportionate response from the district's administration. Well, you can't do that. That is a violation of the act. That basically all you can do is respond and say, I'm referring this on to the superintendent. End of story. Basically here, the board member talked about a matter that involved a staff member that potentially indicated that it was under investigation by the district and that essentially he expected or led the parent to expect that there would be some particular response from the administration. That is way beyond a board member's authority to do. Board member would violate the code of ethics by actively participating in initial and or exit interviews for staff members. That is true. The Ethics Commission has said that participation, whether we agree with them or not, they said that this is not a role of a board member, that this is the role of your administration, and that if you participate in either an initial or an exit interview, you are in fact dealing with an area that's directly administering the schools and is outside the board member's authority. Board member violated Section E when he unilaterally filed a legal action with the commissioner against the board president and the board attorney regarding the manner in which the superintendent's contract was renewed. That is true. That's been held to be a de facto automatic violation of the Ethics Act. The board member may not bring an action against the Board of Education or any board functionary with respect to an activity of the board. That is private action. That is prohibited. Violation of the act for a board member to also serve as an executive officer of the PTA or any other PTA function. It is not a violation of the act. Board members can serve as volunteers, both on organizations related to the school, such as the PTA. You can also volunteer in activities in the district. You have to be careful that if you are volunteering in in-district activities, you not be engaged in any kind of activity that involves supervision of staff or directly involves you where you're taking orders from staff or closely intertwines you with staff activities. So there are certainly things you can do. As I mentioned, you're allowed to chaperone your own child's trip, for example, but you can't be supervising other staff members on that trip. You have to be very careful not to be overly involved in that. And if you have an activity that you're volunteering in, it's always best to check with the superintendent, who can check with the board attorney and make sure that the necessary caveats apply. Next one, violation of 12-24.1G. A board member inadvertently replied all to an email. It was an email to the board, but this is the danger of replying to all. You don't necessarily see who else is copied on that email. Also on that email was the parent who had brought a complaint to the board. And the reply expressed that the board member felt the board did not adequately address the parent's concern. Even though it was inadvertent, that was a violation of the Ethics Act. Although the board member did not intend to violate the act, that action did have that consequence by essentially joining the parent into a discussion with the board that talked about internal board matters and that basically raised a concern about what the board had done with that particular matter. Board member violated sections E and I of the code by asking the director of curriculum whether she was interested in the superintendent's, her boss's job. This is while the superintendent was still there. Don't do that. That's a violation. You basically can't start asking people whether they're interested in becoming superintendent. Board member violated a whole lot of subsections when she advised the superintendent, this was the board president actually, that she should remove the renewal of a non-tenured teaching staff member from the agenda because it would not be supported by a majority of the board. That was not a violation. In that case, it was held that the board member was within her rights to basically give the superintendent a heads up that this really is not going to be carried by the board. You really should basically reconsider your determination. There was no pressure. There was no direct, involvement other than to basically say that, the board's looked at it and, that basically it's going to not end well for you, essentially. And that was held to be okay. Finally, a bonus question. A board member can review a staff's member's file, A, with only with approval of majority of the board, B, without board input, C, upon notice to the board and administration, or D, if there is action pending before the board with respect to that employee. And the answer is D. You can only see a particular staff member's file if you are being asked as a board to vote on some action with respect to that employee. That's the only circumstance. Other than that, you cannot see an individual's personnel file. So any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Green?
I have a brief question. There's a bill coming up in Bill's list for a vendor that I'm voting no to during the assembly that was not authorized by the board. Do you separate conversations that relate to outside vendors that were not approved by the board to be here and the actual staff? Because that'll be a Bill's list question that I'm voting no on publicly. And so to what extent do I state the reasons why I'm voting no for that bill?
Well, you're not required to state reasons.
Am I prohibited?
No, you're not prohibited.
Okay,
either,
that was
but,
my
you know,
question.
But the issue is, you need to keep that basic statement to the basis for why you are voting no on that.
Or the
particular-
facts,
fact,
right?
what-
Yeah.
what you.
It was a public assembly.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you all. You've been
Well,
very
I have one
attentive.
for you.
Sure.
So years ago, when we would hire principals or cabinet level positions, if you want to call it, we used, if there was a committee, one or two board members may have participated. Then I guess a case came down in New Jersey not that long ago.
Yeah, not that long ago. The School Ethics Commission basically said that they discouraged or did not encourage boards from participating in that. They said, if you do that, generally that should only be for higher level, like the superintendent, of course, you have the right to do it, but like assistant superintendent level type or supervisor types positions, that a board member, one or two board members could sit in. They cannot really participate, they said. They can observe, they can be there as observers, and that otherwise you are essentially interfering in an administrative process for the district.
Yeah, I think it came up because previous years, all of a sudden, if you had different
Yeah.
principals, assistant principal, whatever it was, board members like, okay, hey, I'm approving it in 10 minutes or 15 minutes when, it'd be nice to just have some background or not even just to listen in. So, I mean.
Right, exactly. And then that was a very common practice throughout
Right.
districts in the state. And the Ethics Commission then waited and said, no, you're inserting yourself too far into the administrative process.
Right. We had other boards that wanted to sit in on music teachers and language teachers and others. And obviously it's a little,
Yeah,
outside our realm again. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
sure.
All right.
Thank you.
We're done with that. Thank you very much. So if everyone hadn't signed their ethics sheet, if you haven't, please give it to Mr. Patrizio at some point in time. And one more presentation tonight. I believe this is the guidance survey by Mr. Howard. So the mic is yours, sir.
Steve, can I get that clicker back? Do I have to stay stationary for that? Like. Oh, no, but I don't have to stand in front of the camera. Oh. Okay, cool. Good evening, everyone. And everybody in the audience. I don't know, going after ethics was a blessing or a curse. I don't want to say anything negative. I don't want to get sued or ethics charges against the lawyer. But I'll try to go through this as succinctly, as I can. Just a little background history for those who may not know. When I did the HIB assessment for the district, one of the things that I put in there that we were going to do going forward would be to do a thorough assessment of the guidance department, right? So using the Qualtrics software, we sent out a survey to the parents. I also surveyed the guidance staff themselves. And I can say, I think I hold the record. Maybe health had more people respond, but I think I think I hold a record for a number of responses. I actually got like 768, but I had to cut it off at 606 because the other 160 people didn't complete the survey, and I had to compile the data, and it kept changing every day because people kept coming in and finishing, so I had to set it off somewhere. So we stopped at 606. One of the things that I did find out when doing this, because not that I'm going back for my doctorate, but it would make a good question, how parents view guidance departments. And what I found was a lot of the issues that are going to be brought up from the survey data have been existing for 2 decades. So this isn't like really a new problem. And as I talk to other districts, I find that people have all been experiencing the same kind of problem when it comes to some of the things that I'll point out in the survey. So first, why do we need a survey? Well, we survey because we want to try to get a better understanding of what the needs are for students and for families. So it's a proactive way to actually help us set goals and address some of the areas cited that are needed for improvement, right? And my little attempt of being funny is the white elephant in the room, because we've all heard for the longest about issues when it comes to guidance, but there was no real official kind of documented survey of data so that we can lead us to some kind of strategic planning for goals, right? So here are actually some of the benefits I think the survey has, not just for parents, but also for the counselors as well, right? Because it gives people an opportunity to kind of advocate for their children's well-being, ensures like a transparent process, helps us to develop realistic goals. I'm not going to read everything on there, but for counselors, it helps clearly define roles and functions for them, highlight some of the things that they're doing, and also gives them an opportunity to highlight things that we probably wouldn't have known or may need to eliminate. And it basically provides them with an opportunity to talk directly to leadership and help them in terms of what they need to do to achieve, give information, close gaps, or make their jobs better by alleviating a lot of clutter that sometimes happens when you don't strategically look at roles and responsibilities. This is just a little overview of kind of the process. And I'm going to walk a little closer to the screen because as I get older, I can't see. We defined what the actual need for the survey was. I just kind of did that. I began collecting data just from, like I said, from the parents as well as from the counselors themselves. We went through the data. So even though there were a lot of questions on that survey, some of them weren't really data worthy to put into the presentation. So I kind of stuck to the things that were more specific and universal in the responses that the parents were given. We analyze those things and we interpret the results to be able to apply them to the department and moving forward. So it's not just, we're not surveying just to survey. We want to survey, get the information, understand it, use it proactively to make improvements. Here's our distribution kind of list. Like I said, there were 606 responses. You can see that the majority, not the majority, but the largest number of responses came from the high school, like 33%, or rounded up 34% came from the high school. And when we go through the individual slides, some of the questions I grouped together, and I'll explain why I grouped them together. Other ones were disaggregated by school because I'm trying to exemplify a certain point. And then there's like district-wide data that you're going to see as well. And this is going to go up on the website, so everybody actually get a chance to see and see the data and go through it a little bit more succinctly on your own. Grade distribution, you can see like although the high school was with 205 responses, they were the highest. You can see it was kind of even dispersal among the number of people who responded. Highest response rate came from 7th grade in SATs, you can see. And there's actually a good smattering of responses through across the district. So what does the data say? These are the big takeaways from the information that we got from the data. One is that the community really has a very limited understanding of the role and function of the guidance staff and what services are actually available. And when we go into the actual responses, you'll see that a lot of those responses are neither, meaning they don't feel it was good, they don't feel it was bad, they just don't know. And mostly don't know because there's really no communication with the guidance department. And it could be a lot of different reasons for that. 2, increased and more regular communication between the guidance department and our families is needed. That's clear. We got to find a way to be better at getting information out to families and making sure that they understand everything that is available to them, because in the counselor's defense, there's a lot of things that they are doing, but if nobody knows what they're doing, how successful or actually good are those services? 3, more attention should be paid towards the needs of students as they transition between buildings, Indian Hill to Sats, Village to Indian Hill to Sats to the high school, especially. That was one that was a high. There was a lot of communication from the parents about the transition going from 8th into 9th grade. So transitions between the buildings is something that parents are concerned about overall. 4, parents feel that more support should be given, and this is revolve around the high school questions. More support needs to be given to students in reference to college, like admissions, application process, career planning, that whole gamut. And 5, the interpersonal relationships between the counselors and their students, they feel it should be increased. It should be more one-to-one personal relationships between the counselors and students. So the first slide, which when I told you some of them are going to jumble the question together for this main reason. The question number 5, the one that's a bar graph, asks, like, in your experience, how quickly does your school counselor respond to you? Although the yellow signifies that the majority of the people who actually responded, who reached out to their counselor, said they respond like within a 24-hour period. But the more interesting thing, and one thing that, I've done a lot of data presentations in my life. One thing they tell you to not do is point things out to people. That I put the charts up there, I put the data up there. You as a person looking should make your own assumption and get your own questions in your head about what this data is saying. But, for the lack of, for lack of time, and also just to kind of move this along, there's certain things I'm going to point out. The one thing that I pointed out, like the red in each of those questions, 5:16 was how much time do you spend with your child's counselor? Question 17, the one that's up there on the right, how many times have you met with your child's counselor? And that 4th question on the page, number 18, how many times have you met with your child's counselor for a parent-teacher conference or something to that nature. The red on those answers signify that people don't have an opinion one way or another because they have not met with their counselor. So that could mean a bunch of different things. One, and this is kind of what I found from when you look at the responses in the data. Well, why aren't people meeting with their counselors? Most people don't think it's necessary to go to a counselor unless you have problems, right? So if my kid is not having a problem, why am I talking to a counselor? So I can't even really answer any of these questions because my kid has been okay. I haven't really talked to a counselor. Seems like a nice lady, but I have really no need to interact with her, right? So you're going to see a lot of people in the neither section. Now that could be a good thing, could say that, well, if a lot of people feel like there's no need to reach out to the counselor, hey, maybe that's a good thing. Or it could be a bad thing because there's certain things that the counselors, activities, workshops, presentations that they do that are pertinent to parents, regardless if your kid is having an issue or not. Like we had a HIB presentation where a lawyer from NJPSA came down, did a really good job of explaining like the law and the difference between bullied and conflict and why some things that you may think is an HIB is really not because it doesn't fit all of the characteristics that the state outlines, but the attendance there wasn't great. You know, those types of things could be because people really aren't aware of what's going on, or it could be this, that my child's not really having an issue, so this is not something that I really want to attend. But those are the kind of things that we got to try to figure out as we move forward. These next few slides are still along the lines of that communication realm. Like this is, I feel, consistently informed about the counseling program in my kid's school. Informed meaning that I understand what they're offering, what groups they're offering, you know, what programs they're doing, how many times they're pulling out kids for a different thing, how many times they're pushing into classes for character ed, socio-emotional stuff, any of that nature. You see the biggest part of that is neutral. Like people really don't know what is going on inside of the schools and what the counselors are doing. And I broke it out like there's a district view, which you can see blue is a neutral. And there's also, I broke it out by school. Percentage wise, you got 35%. If you add the strongly disagree and disagree, you got 35% of the people who responded saying that I don't know what's going on inside of the counseling department. So you got 35 there, and then you got another almost 40% of people saying, I don't know because I'm not interacting with it. So I really have no clue of what's going on inside the counseling department. Same thing with communication. Communication is effective regarding my child's academic needs. Again, you see the biggest part of that response is neutral, that people haven't even reached out to the guidance department. And that could be because, again, they don't really have any issues academically, so there was really no need to reach out to the guidance department. But again, you don't really need an academic issue to reach out to guidance. It could be for future planning. Like I want my, I'm interested in my son going on this path. You know, he's really interested in math. He wants to get to AP, whatever, when he gets to the high school. What do you think is the best avenue that he needs to go? So those are the kind of conversations that the counselors can be helpful with. Again, I'm aware of the services that exist. The biggest part, again, is neutral. And when you talk about services that exist outside of the school, those are things that I would consider therapeutic services, like counseling, outside counseling for students who are in need, or any kind of other problem that people may be experiencing in a home that they need assistance that goes beyond what the school can offer. There's a plethora of different things available for families to get help, but most probably aren't aware of what those things are, that or where those places they can go to get help. I'm aware of the various groups and activities coordinated through guidance. You can see, no, I have, most parents have no idea what is actually offered in the schools from the guidance department. Like in the elementary, they do a lot of groups. They do a lot of lunch bunch groups. They have divorce groups. They have groups for kids who are new to the district, you know, kids who may have problems, social skills, making friends. They have groups like that. But as a parent, if I don't really know what's going on or what groups are offered, how am I going to send my kid there if I don't even know it's in existence? These next couple of questions are mostly high school related. All right, my school counselor has been helpful in navigating my child through academic courses required and necessary for graduation. You can see the green part there, which is the highest response for this question, is that most parents agree that when it comes, I guess, to academic planning, you know, working with guidance has been relatively successful in their navigation through getting to graduation. But when you go to the specific question of college, it changes. Most, or the largest part there says neither, but you can see from the percentage, the red and the purple signify people who strongly disagree or disagree. So you have 29, almost 30% of the respondents saying that they're not getting what they expect to get when it comes to helping their child through the college application process. But then you see there's a large 77% that is kind of in the middle. So I one of the good things about Qualtrics is that you can dig down and disaggregate any question by school, by gender, there's a whole plethora of different ways you can look at it. So I went back in for that same question, and I just wanted to see specifically by grade level who was responding and what were their response. Because you figure maybe 11th and 12th graders are the ones that are more in tune with college. You're closer to the end, you know, so they will be the ones that I will really want to see what are they saying in terms of help. And although the responses aren't as high in those areas, you can see like 12th grade, for the people who did respond for 12th grade, you got the majority, 35% of them saying they strongly disagree, and then another 19% saying they disagree. So that's over 50% of the people who responded for 12th graders saying that they're not getting what they think they should get in terms of college and career planning for their kid.
Hey, Art, should your slide before that one? So that equals way over 100%. Is that correct or not? I mean, the blue is,
I thought those are respondents. So those.
so you have a half a respondent?
So in other words, like that's.
The 77.5, that,
People.
oh, gotcha. Okay, comma. Okay, thank you. I was like, okay, I'm
I don't know.
slow in the
Can't-
uptake here.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
you know, I
We're at
can't,
130% on these. I was like,
you know, I can't see. You ask me questions, I got to read numbers and try to add. I can't, I'm barely able to see up
gotcha.
there.
Thank you.
All right, no problem.
Because if you're a visual learner, visual looker, that's a half a pie and. Right, exactly. Yeah. Yep,
Well, if
thank
the
you.
numbers were wrong, I would blame Qualtrics because I'm not adding that stuff up. I'm just getting it what
No, I
it
think you're
says
right.
off of the program. What was I? Did I do the screen? Yes, I did. No, one thing I wanted to say on this. I talked to a couple of school districts on how they handle this problem, because this is not just a Holmdel problem, not just a New Jersey problem. This is like a countrywide issue. People are spending money to get people to help their kids prepare for college. So I was looking at some things that some other districts do in terms of addressing this issue. One of the interesting things I saw, like in Princeton, they have a whole counselor dedicated to college and career planning. So you have one counselor that that does all of the workshops for parents. They give all of the information to them. They do all of the parent nights, all of that stuff. But that still doesn't preclude the other counselors from writing letters, being involved like in the process. I said, oh, that sounds great. How does that solve your problem? The director said no. They still have issues with college and career planning. The parents still feel like their needs are not necessarily being serviced correctly. So I don't know what a good solution to that will be. I mean, like I am, well, at the end, we're doing so some questions. So we're trying to address this as succinctly as we can. But I don't want to stand up here and say I got a recipe for success for that, because then I'd probably be a millionaire. But it is something that we're actually looking to try to address. I asked the counselors, like I said, I surveyed the counselors before. I asked them, well, before that, my bad. This is actually a parent question. I have a clear understanding of the role and function of the guidance counselor in the school. And you can see the blue is an overwhelming no, that parents really have no idea what the guidance counselors do. Some respondents didn't even know who their guidance counselor was, which is actually kind of disturbing when you're in Village or Indian Hill. There's only one of them, but most people had no clue who their counselor was. So it was an overwhelming no for that question. So that made me think, well, let's go into looking what are some of the roles and responsibilities of the counseling department. In that survey, I also asked the parents, what are the top things that you feel that the counselors should be focusing their time on? And I guess it's really no surprise that number one on that list is bullying, right? Bullying is an ongoing issue that we have been trying to work and proactively address. But I mean, you can see the top responses: college process, which probably every high school person kind of put that on; academic achievement, goal setting, problem solving. Those are like your top 5, right? But interestingly enough, when you ask the guidance counselors what do they feel about this same kind of question, I surveyed them. I said, well, do you feel that the duties that you're assigned kind of interfere with your role? And you see, they all agree that these other ancillary duties that they are assigned interferes with what they feel like they should be doing for students. And then, well, what is it that you feel like you should be responsible for? And you can see stress management, social relationship skills, respect and cultural acceptance, conflict resolution. What they feel they should be doing isn't too far off from what the parents feel they should be doing. Relatively, you can say it's a mirror. So the things that they feel are important, the parents kind of also feel that they're important. Here are some of the actual things that the guidance counselors are doing. I just asked them to share with me some of the things that you do during the course of the day. Now, this is a conglomerate of all buildings. Like, every building is not really doing the same thing, and every counselor is not responsible for everything on that slide. But these are some of the things that they mentioned that they do. They're reps for all of the parent group meetings. They're members of IRS. They sit as case management for 504s. Like I said, they do a lot of lunch groups. Counselors are the anti-bullying specialists for the districts, which take up in itself a large amount of time. Every character read program that goes on in the buildings are pretty much run through guidance. They're on the safety committee. They're on the crisis team. They're on our threat assessment team that Amanda and I just started to put together to get them trained. They do scheduling. They counsel students. their testing coordinator. And the one thing that they said that takes up the most amount of their time is testing, because it's not just the test when it's being proctored, it's also all the prep work to make sure kids are in the right groups. If kids require some kind of special accommodations, they're the ones that are figuring out the accommodations, room assignments. If there's errors coming up and they have to write a report, they're doing that. They're also involved in if a student misses a test and they got to do a makeup, they're doing the makeup. So the testing by far was the most time consuming part of their day. And then the other stuff, I'm not going to read everything, orientations, dealing with parent issues, working with kids when they're in crisis. You see they have a lot of different roles and responsibilities. They wear a lot of hats. That's what I'm trying to say. And when you think about it, the American School Counseling Association said that the ratio, the recommended ratio was like 250 to 1. The national average is 444, I think, to 1. You can see like at Village, where it's 811 to 1, she's double what the national average is. And Indian Hill as well was 657 to 1. So when you think about that, the ratio of students to that one person, and then you add all of the responsibilities that they're entrusted with, you can get a kind of a clearer picture of why these people are busy, and also why they're maybe not as visible as parents may want them to be. Some of them just simply don't have the time to do it. Especially like when you think of Indian Hill, which 4, 5, and 6, those are all tested grades. And she's the only counselor in there, and she's responsible for all the testing. So when testing comes around, she's completely shut down to prepare and make sure that the testing is going in accordance to the way it should. So then the question is, what happens to a kid who's in crisis or may need some help? One person can't really do it all. So what are some next steps? I sat down with Dr. Cascone, the building principals, and also I sat with the guided staff. I showed them the same data that I showed you. We had a clear, open conversation about where are we going to go from here, and it's not a personal thing. The numbers are the numbers. It is what it is. These are, like it or hate it, this is what people think. This is what people are saying. So there's no misconception. These are facts of what we're dealing with. So how can we address this? So some of the suggestions that we came up with, and this is a combination of some of the research that I've done about it, and also some of the other districts that I talked to, things that we could possibly think about doing. One, what I thought was a good idea was a formation of a school council counseling advisory group. And that's made up of parents, teachers, counselors, CST people, admin, also to sit at the beginning of the year, think about what things that we want to try to address, work towards, improve. And then at the end of the year, this group gets back together again. Did we kind of meet those goals? It's a real simple kind of concept. Get together, talk about some things that are troubling and that we want to try to address. Think of a plan of action to address it. Then meet again towards the end to see how successful or not successful we were in the process. And it gives an opportunity for all stakeholders to be involved in it. So we're not operating in a vacuum. It's completely transparent. You got parents, you have board members on there, and anybody who wants to be on that council can sit on the council and give their input to it. I thought that was a very good idea that they had. Two, simply more proactive marketing strategies. I mean, like we have websites, things like a counselor personal website where they're broadcasting everything they're doing on there. Could be the difference between a parent who's sitting at home and not knowing what's going on in school and finding out something. Or the same way that Mr. Logren and Dr. Kokoda, they're very good with sending out updates daily about what's going on in their buildings. The counseling department could do the same thing as well, send out like their own separate update email to families about this is what's coming up, this workshop is what's coming up, this is what we're doing. Have you thought about this group for your child? Testing is coming up. You may want to think about doing this, doing that. Just something on a regular basis where the communication is kind of increased between the department and the families. And then other things like social media networks, like I said, their own personal websites. And we also should think about ways to provide more clearer education to parents about what are the actual roles and responsibilities of the counselor, so they know what these people should do and are doing and what they can ask them and get help from, right? 3, it's necessary to provide some additional support for the guidance staff. You know, they just have to be released from a lot of the administrative and non-counseling duties that they're shackled with. That will give them the opportunity to dedicate themselves to doing what a lot of the parents said in the survey: more time with students, you know, more time with providing programs for students, giving them some place to go and serving them, as opposed to being shackled with administrative stuff. And 4, again, transition. So how students experience the transition was a major takeaway from the response data, especially with the high school transitions. So more attention and focus towards that particular developmental domain, student-centered transition planning, is also necessary as we move forward, you know, especially, you know, for kids going from 8th grade into 9th grade. And I know Mr. Logren has a lot of ideas. I've been working with Dr. Kokoda on, you know, getting that transition, getting 8th graders up into the high school, getting them to meet some of the upperclassmen and get an understanding of the world that they'll come into once they enter into 9th grade. So some questions still we need to ponder, right? So how do we really assist families in understanding the counselor's role and function within a comprehensive guidance program? Because the more the parents clearly understand roles and function, the more interaction you would see between home and school guidance department, and the stronger the program will be from parental input. Given the various responsibilities that the counselors have, you know, how do we ensure their time is redirected to students? Students are the primary reason why we all are here. So they should be the primary focus of these professionals, not shackling them down with administrative duties that could be done or redirected into another vein, right? So how are some of our surrounding districts addressing some of the issues, especially with college and career assistance? The one good thing about being in the assistant soup seat, you get an opportunity to talk to people from a lot of different places, and people are willing to help. So I have made some real strong connections with some of the people in Mercer County, because I live in Mercer County, and also Essex County as well, where they're kind of brainstorming this very same question. Like I said, like this is kind of a problem that exists for lots of districts. How do we give stakeholders the opportunity to collaborate and provide feedback? A lot of parents from the survey data felt like they have no opportunity to give their voice on stuff. So we got to find better ways of making sure that parents can give their opinion and their voice, and the things that they are concerned about are actually front and center when we do this kind of strategic planning. You know, how do we create more, again, how do we create more opportunities for parents to interact and connect? You know, the guidance staff, to their credit, they do put on a variety of different positive programs and events. Sometimes attendance isn't always the best. So what ways can we get parents out to come see some of these things that they're doing and take advantage of the knowledge that these counseling professionals have? How do we inspire our parents to reach out to guidance and participate in events, even if their kids are not having an issue or a problem, right? So to be more integral into the process. All right, and how do we ensure that students have access as well as a thorough understanding of everything that's available in terms of guidance and mental health services to them? You know, in another presentation I did, like some people don't know what's available to them. And instead of asking somebody, a lot of kids, even a lot of adults, they tend to not reach out, and you wind up suffering in silence. So there's help and things that are available. But again, if you don't know what's available, how are you going to go and get the help from that thing that you need? And the last thing, which is equally important, how do we make sure that we safeguard the health and mental well-being of our guidance staff members? It's kind of like, how do you help the helpers? Because these people can't be their best selves if they're not feeling like their best selves. Like, I have to help your students, counsel them through their problems, but I'm suffering from issues and problems of my own. How much of my mental space is not being utilized because I got other stuff floating around in my head? The more mentally healthy and competent that they are, the better they can be to the kids and also the other staff, because they also help staff too. The better they can be to the staff and the students who are all entrusted into their care. Right. So that's everything I had in terms of the data and the reports. If anybody has any questions for me.
Open to the board for questions, comments.
Yeah, I do have some questions. First, I want to thank you for this nice presentations. They really bring these things up. We really need to focus on, right? That's why we are here and for the students. I just have for something, is this questions or something I think maybe help for currently every time I meet the teachers for the parent meetings, we just meet certain like subject teachers, math teachers and English, science. So I know each one will focus on that subject. Do we have any? So one either counselor or teachers who know all perspective of that students. So because otherwise each teacher only know very little pieces of that student. Is that good at the math or good at the science or something wrong with other stuff or mentally or this? Do we have certain teachers or counselor responsible for certain students understand each individuals of all, include all the perspectives, right? And know this person as all students, as a whole student, not like pieces of different subjects of the studies there. And then probably from earlier, like middle school or from Indian Hill to the high school. Then you understand that this, maybe we can have a file of each student and we can trace or give the right instructions for these specific students for their growth and the path, right? Understand them very well, because currently from my understanding, my experiences, each teacher I get is pieces of information. And then we know the whole of these students as one person, right?
Right. When you look at the teachers in the elementary, because they see them for multiple different
better-
subjects. They have a better understanding of
Yeah.
what the whole
Yeah.
child is. But as you move up and classes are kind of specialized in accordance to discipline, you lose that kind
Yeah.
of focus. Like I taught seventh grade social studies, right? So my kid in the social studies class, I could be in a parent conference. Oh, he's great, right? He always participates. He's always happy. We're high-fiving on the way out. But then I'm sitting in a conference and the math teacher's like, oh my God, like he doesn't listen. I don't know what to do. He doesn't do his homework. He sleeps half the time in my class. So like my perspective on him is different than their perspective, right?
Yeah.
And when you get to the high school, that's even more difficult. Like middle school, when it start making those changes is hard. We tried to rectify that a little bit by having teachers in teams and meeting them in teams, but that's not always possible. That's also why it's increasingly important to have counselors available who can possibly sit in and give an idea of what the whole
Yeah.
child is, because they can get an opportunity to see them, not just hear about what is in social studies, but also hear about what's going on in science or hear about what's going on in English. Teachers, unless you teach like dual subjects, it'll be hard to get a teacher to get that kind of perspective. But again, that's another important reason why counselors should be freed up to do that kind of thing, sit in these conferences. They can't really sit in everyone. That'll be an enormous amount of time. But, in situations where a parent will request, I want to try to get a better understanding of my kid through the whole day. Do you think you could sit in with me on these conferences to give me a global perspective?
Yeah.
I think those are things that could possibly happen, and I don't think it's anything really wrong with that.
Yeah, currently we're treating the seventh grade like they're college students. We're doing the same thing. In college students, you just pick up the subject and then you're on your own, right?
Right, yeah.
Thank you.
Kim?
So first I want to say that one of the things in your action plans that I think that you should have mentioned is that in the proposed budget are 2 new guidance counselors, one for Village and one for Indian Hill, because kudos to administration that if the budget does pass, correct, it's 2 new guidance counselors.
Just one plus one. But then we are also adding the 2, bringing the 2 clinicians on board.
clinicians
Yeah, but
to
it's,
help on that end
Right.
of it. So, okay, so 1, but plus the 2 clinicians to
Mhm.
hopefully look at some of the other social social emotional aspects. But also in looking at, so that'll help the ratios, but I think it's also part of our, our action plan of what we're doing to be proactive. And then, but also if you look at the numbers where we are down ratio in Holmdel High School, technically, and I just did rough math, if you took 190 times 4, if that's about what we have, and you divided that total by 3, each counselor would be at 253, which is about the recommended, and you would have 1 extra to work on just college counseling, if that is something that we wanted to do as a, but one of the areas that I think as far as not helping enough, as far as the college planning and things like that, having my son now graduating college, but going, through this whole process, was that I felt the department was a little late on everything. So other districts were putting out information starting sophomore year, not junior year. By junior year, we already went to visit schools. I think some of it is we're doing it, just not in a timely fashion that's early enough where people are already looking. I mean, we have friends that are sophomores right now, and they've already been to 3 or 4 college visits on long weekends, but we're not talking about that until junior year. And here, at least in Holmdel, that's too late. And I do know other districts that are doing it earlier. So I think some of it we're doing, it's just not in a timely fashion.
and I think that's borne out in the data, right? Right. If you look at that slide, I forget the title of it, was basically with or we go back to the slide on one of the slides in college career. Right.
This one?
Yeah, so no, it's the slide college and career planning continued. Yes, that one. You see that that the number of respondents who are not able to really even answer that question, don't feel comfortable asking that question is much higher. It is higher in 9th and 10th grade, which would lead one to believe that they haven't even had exposure to that information and services. I thought that when I looked at that slide, and I think that corroborates what you're saying.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that some of it we are doing, but it's too late. That's all. But so thank you for a very thorough.
Thank you.
Can I
Good-
comment
good
on
point.
what Kim just said? Because I also felt with the destination graduation stuff, why not even put the buzz in the student's ear as early as 7th and 8th grade? Create a roadmap, a vision for them to even understand what the future looks like after high school, so they can start preparing for what they need to do in 7th and 8th grade to prepare them for high school, to get into the right classes or do the right things to get into
So-
colleges.
I will say that Dr. Kokoda and Mr. Logren did that for I mean, they've always had like this 8th grade kind of transition night, but was it last year or this year? I don't know, but I think it's for our incoming freshmen now. So I guess it was last year for the first time. They did it in a timely fashion where it was, this is what your typical would look like, and it was a presentation for parents and 8th graders to come in the fall before their high school year.
Or maybe even an assembly,
Yeah.
have a speaker come in 7th grade and just start providing some vision for the kids.
It's a great point. And I think it speaks to the idea of, we'll call it future planning, rather than in college and career, because I think it can start much, much earlier. It can even start as early as elementary school. And it's really a process by which the kids are developing a level of self-awareness about who they are, what they like, what they're good at. And as that scales up into the secondary grades, that starts to marry up with more concrete conversations about careers in college, right? But I think that's the disconnect, is that when kids, even if we expose them to it in 8th grade, have we provided a process by which they're able to participate meaningfully and in a self-aware
Understand it.
way in those conversations? And I would argue not, and not just in Holmdel. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that only approximately 35% of students finish college in 4 years, a lot of dropouts, a lot of transfers, a lot of major changes. I think it's because kids go into that decision not really having a clear self-aware idea of what they want to do. So I agree.
And to comment also, in the subcommittee meeting, we were talking about the roadmaps for children. As to note also, it's great to see the amount of village parents that participated. So obviously they want to consider guidance for their children at such younger ages. What's concerning is nobody seems to be following up and meeting with the guidance counselors. So how to encourage that parent involvement to get them in communicating with, because it's a partnership for sure. So I understand the school can only do so much. The parents need to get a little activated if we can encourage them. But just to finish up, and I appreciate this is great and critical for the students. So thank you for spearheading this, Mr. Howard, and putting this on. It seems like this is a nationwide concern. So hopefully we can work hard to create the model here in Holmdel for what guidance should be for these students and preparing them for what is becoming an ultra competitive world that they're going to face. So yeah, I just wanted to, I mentioned destination graduation, communication. I look forward to seeing some of the marketing tactics we can do so that when this survey is taken again, parents are more fully informed of the actual services that we're providing. So that's extremely important as well. And we'll continue our discussions on the roadmap just to help the students out. Thank you.
Terrence?
Yes, thank you. First of all, Mr. Howard, always the statesmanship and the steady hand with topics that are significant. It's really appreciated, whether previously, which was the HIB, and essentially like discussing the history and us being candid and transparent about what's actually happening and having the real data out there. And here too, there are stats in here that are frankly devastating. Or you could look at that as tremendous opportunity, depending on your frame of reference. And so I'm going to start back from the back and go to the front, and I'll be as quick as I can. Just starting right off with student to counselor ratios. We should get this listed on the personnel committee and really talk about what the right level of staffing is. So that's a topic for another day. I see, and there's an interesting correlation to some stats. The Village School 811 students to 657 students to 1 for Indian Hill School. You're not getting out the front door of getting your work done at 657 students to 1. But here's what's interesting. When you get to SATs, you get to Holmdel High School, it's 190 to 1. When you tie it back to, and by the way, I'm glad, it's a great first step, and I'm so happy that Qualtrics is finally being put to good use. This is the reason for Qualtrics and this kind of data. So that's great that we're finally using it properly. But if you go back to Q, you don't have to, but I'm just saying in Q16, on average, how much time do you think you've spent with your child's counselor? Holmdel High School, 5, and it's 5 counselors. Village, 1, 86. The red's about the same as where I'm going with that. The same level of folks saying none at all, right? So it's not necessarily it's a force multiplier. It depends on what force you're multiplying. So the other piece that also I think is devastating, that bullying is blowing out college admissions, academic achievement, goal setting, career planning, problem solving, coping skills. So we've let bullying bulldog over the real work that needs to be done. So obviously that's a key issue. And I'll mention it in public. I think first step is get rid of these cell phones. And you watch this bullying, you watch the bullying data plummet. I would get rid of all the cell phones in all the schools. I'll say that publicly. But going back to some of the information, the school counselors, there's a disconnect that I see, which is interesting, in that there's a list of a big list of not distractions, what was it called? Interference with their jobs. I feel that other assigned tasks and duties interfere with my role as a counselor. 100%, if I'm reading that right, agree or strongly agree with that. So, which is interesting because most of the parents are saying they never heard from you. 49% are saying we never hear from you. So that to me is a disconnect. And so in the interference, what specific roles in that big list, like not for today, but in those lists of all things that are pretty important, what's interfering? What is that list? What you mentioned, I'm not saying testing is an interference, but what is it exactly? Because it's interesting. You talk about finances and budgets and things like that. When I speak to parents, I hear about a hidden tax, whether it's offsetting educational deficits in the classroom with some educators, not all, where they're having to not augment tutoring, they're having to actually get tutoring to survive. That hidden tax, which Dr. Cherney, when he was here, he said should never happen. If you have to pay for a tutor, we're not doing our job. But similarly, parents are paying for college admission, guidance and help. If you had, say, 15 parents pay $7,500, right, for college admission assistance on their own because they don't feel like they're getting it, that's $112,000. You can now have a full-time person for that role, and that's their only job. Some parents will say they pay $10,000. That's another hidden tax. So driving to the financial part of that as well. The other item I wanted to mention, which is really interesting and to be able to hear the answers, is on the questions where we're asking parents, and parents have to engage too. I mean, let's be fair. Some parents are very comfortable with stasis as it is. They're not reaching out. They may not be getting a call. They're comfortable with not engaging. So that's a parent responsibility. But the questions that are asked, and I think this is an opportunity for a future survey, the questions are asked to the parents. How quickly does your counselor get back to you? How much time have you spent with your counselor since the beginning of the year? Some of the questions that I think would be very instructive and then match them would be, in your experience, how quickly do you call the parent back? How much time do you spend with the parent or the student? And see if those dovetail or not, meaning giving the counselor or related professional the opportunity to answer the same question, because 100% say they're interfered with, their tasks are interfered with. It's pretty significant. So I'm suggesting that we try to identify, well, what are they? Well, maybe that should be, offloaded. Staffing and personnel. You can't complain about counselors if there's no counselor, or there's one for 800 students. I mean, that's just not It's not fair. So those are a couple of observations I was making on the numbers. And just to make sure I didn't mention the ratios. Oh, and just a quick last item on production goals. For example, how many parents have you communicated with in the last quarter? 74, 32, right? How many contact points have you made, right? How do you document that? I mean, there's customer management systems or client management systems or student management systems. Have you called all of your students? Yes, no. Why not? How did it go? That kind of thing. So if there's outreach and not reach back, then that's a different issue. And then if you have so much workflow, well, then that would naturally tie to personnel and making sure that you have the supports and making sure that you have what you need. So those are just a few of my observations on this. And I think getting that list inverted, I don't so much think of it stress management, social relationships. There's nuts and bolts of your studies, your academics, your college planning that's getting shouldered out by items that I think if we get to the root causes, I'm identifying one single example of the distraction of the social disease of social media and other things like that. But if you start extracting the root cause, then you may see a really set of wonderful results and let them get back to what we're here for, reading, writing, arithmetic, and delivering value for the students. So thank you. Appreciate sharing that input. And this is a wonderful first step that sorely overdue and wonderful to hear tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you, Board President.
Thank you, Terrence. Anyone else? So Art, I got 3 things for you. I could talk an hour about this. I could talk 3 hours about this. My kids are in 12th and 10th grade. Obviously, I've been hearing this since 1st grade, since I first got on this board. So I do appreciate this information. One comment would be, I would have added the slide almost to what Terrence was saying, like, do you pay for college counseling? If you do, how much do you pay? That's a really great one, because I agree with Terrence. I've learned that the high school guidance counselors are not necessarily college counselors. But if you look at the top 10 responses, bullying 206, college applications 204, and you said before 600 some odd people responded to the survey and 100 some odd did not, I would bet a lot come from that high school that didn't make it through the survey, whatever it was, because I've been hearing for years. And I used to be like, wait, you pay for college? How much do you pay? And I don't make a lot of money. So when I had to pay some money this year, didn't enjoy it. But number 1 is college applications, where you could say tied for number 1, right? You go to the next slide. It's not even on the top 10. It's not even on the top 10. I'm at a loss there. I really am. So that would be a huge opportunity, I see Trinity here. I'm not going to put her on the spot. I don't know if Trinity Hahn had paid for college counseling. I know she probably went to Foley Prep and Khan Academy, and a lot of the kids do a lot of those, testing and things like that. But it's not even on the top 10. That just throws me way off. So, and then the other thing I would say, which is so important, is freshman year, these kids got to meet their guidance counselor just so they know who the heck they are. So if they're having bad thoughts, and maybe they go, I could go to this lady or this guy because that's my guidance counselor. Go to the gym class for an entire week. You'll meet every student in that class. Because I agree that those ratios are overwhelming. Thankfully, it's 190 to 1 in the high school. These are your customers for 4 years. By senior year, they should know Pete Reddy, Anthony Marzano, Max Woodward, and all those kids. They should be able to pick them out and say, he hangs out with them. He does this. They should absolutely not. Freshman year, not really. By sophomore year, oh yeah, I know Tyler Reddy. He does this. He hangs out with those kids. Bad kid, good kid, gets in trouble a lot. Academic, whatever it is. Just so if the kid's starting to, all of a sudden he disappears, then the next day you got a central regional kid and the kid's gone. That's the last, Scott and I talk about it a lot. Like that's to me, thankfully sitting here all these years, I think we only had, well, I don't want to say only, we have had an incident like that over the years. And that's to me like the most touching, but those would be the 3 things I see that I would want to comment on. I think this is great. I think there's so much opportunity. So I think we should definitely, if we could rehuddle this back in, at the end of the school year, come over the summer. If this is something part of a board retreat or definitely board goals, I know this has been on there for years. So I appreciate it and thanks for listening. All right. I guess we're done. You're off the Budweiser hot seat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard.
Trinity Hahn, you waited so long and patiently. I know as a senior, you're at the end of your senior year almost, so homework's probably at a minimum. So it's only 9:15, so probably doing our homework now. All yours.
Hello, everyone. To start off, Project Graduation is currently running a fundraiser available to all grades in the Holmdel Schools District. They are selling senior walk t-shirts for the classes of 2023 through 2037, Holmdel drawstring bags, and graduation lawn signs for Village, Indian Hill, SATS, and the high school. Additionally, the 4 high school classes are selling colored t-shirts for the upcoming spring battle of the classes. Shirts will be required by certain grades for participation in games at the event, so please consider buying one to support the HHS classes. Furthermore, the HFEE's Battle of the Faculties event will be held tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. at the high school. Students are encouraged to come out to support their teachers. Lastly, Retro Fitness of Lincroft has partnered with the Holmdel Schools District so that any staff or students can sign up with a $0 enrollment fee. All proceeds will go to the Holmdel Unified Sports Programs. As a note for all seniors, now is the time to be applying for scholarships. The Holmdel High School Guidance Department has a full list of scholarships on their website, including many opportunities from Holmdel organizations. And as a note for all juniors, junior prom contracts are due tomorrow. Thank you, and that concludes the student report.
Thank you, Trinity. Any questions, comments for our wonderful senior?
Can I just add one thing? Thank you,
Absolutely.
Trinity. I just want to add, I don't know if this is the right time, but for Indian Hill, I just want to put it out there publicly to the community. The PLG and the staff, kudos to them. They put together a career day that I think we should voice on June 2nd, which is a great opportunity for parents in the community to get involved and talk about your career to the children. It will be an incredibly inspiring day for the children. And these are the types of events I'd like to see moving forward. But I just want to put that out there. If you want to consider that as a parent to come in, it's June 2nd. There's a link going around to sign up. Please consider registering, getting in there and inspiring our 7th and 8th graders. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Normally that would be new business, but very good plug. That's a good trend. Paul said, well, okay.
I was wondering if the student report can be moved ahead of the major presentations, giving them an opportunity to decide if they wanted to leave earlier. I just.
You mean in
feel bad.
future?
For future, yeah.
Yeah, normally we don't have four presentations, but you're
Right.
right.
Yeah.
But we like to keep Trinity here. She doesn't want to leave us. But yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Report of the superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just starting off with the presenting the enrollment. The district, since the last report, is up 29 students. Village 814, Indian Hill 659, SATS 523, the high school 953, for a total enrollment of 2,949 students. Yes.
In 1 month? That's interesting, right?
No, that's a net gain since.
Oh, for the year.
Yeah, for the
Okay,
year.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, I'm going to keep my report relatively brief as it's a lot on the agenda this evening. I would be remiss if I did not publicly acknowledge again the terrible tragedy which occurred in Nashville this week. And obviously our nation has suffered another senseless act of violence, tearing apart more families and more communities. I, like all of us, could speak to this troubling and fatal trend and possible explanations and remedies. However, what I know is that my reach and my influence, my mission is focused on this community and keeping the students, staff, and the community of Holmdel Public Schools safe and secure. As I stated after the Uvalde school shooting, which happened shortly after I arrived in Holmdel, these periodic but all too frequent tragedies thrust the topic and concern of school safety back into the consciousness of the general public. However, the community should know that our focus and vigilance with respect to school safety and security never wanes and it never lapses. Yesterday, I sent a letter to the community relinking a video from a school security town hall that we had scheduled in early March and a follow-up memorandum, which outlines a number of important considerations, not only that we are taking, but also which parents, guardians, and students can take. The hardening of our security infrastructure, tightening of drilling procedures, and ongoing truly exceptional collaboration with the Holmdel Police Department are all effective and concrete steps which have and will continue to be taken on the part of the school district and Board of Education. We know, however, that mental illness, alienation, ostracization can all play a part in driving a person to commit an unthinkable act like this. In the short time that I've been here as your superintendent, whether in my spoken words and or deeds, the manner in which I interact with the people and the message which I strive to make is that every person feels welcome and like they belong. And this is a mantle which each and every one of us must take up. And while there have been occasions when violence has been perpetrated on communities by perfect strangers from outside of those communities, more times than not, these acts of violence are perpetrated by either present or former members of our communities. Even as we, again, take every concrete step to harden our targets, we must continue to strive to destigmatize mental health, be ever extending our hands in support of our neighbors, and sending a clear message that everyone belongs, everyone has value. As saddened and perhaps troubled as I am by what occurred in Nashville and what occurs all too frequently in our country, I am filled with both a sense of confidence in the steps we've taken to date, but also the character and unity of this community. With that, I would, in closing, would like to take this opportunity to wish our community all the best for safe and restful spring recess. To those celebrating Easter and Passover and Ramadan, I wish you safe and joyous holidays with your families. And just a reminder that the district will be closed on Tuesday, April 11th for the second of 3 snow day givebacks. And Mr. President, that is my report, which I respectfully submit into the record.
Thank you, sir. Any comments from the superintendent?
Yeah,
Yes, Sam.
totally agree with Dr. Katz's concept. The concrete is for protections, also it's isolations too. So the community should build on inclusive, and everyone should think they belong. And also the mental HIV, that's so important to for the school to make it the priorities. Like Dr. Katz's said, most time those happen is not totally strangers did the school the shootings to the school. Is people who were relevant to the school. Thank you.
Thanks. HIB report?
I submit the report as presented in the closed executive session into the record, President.
Thank you very much. Brings us to community reports. Ms. Kim, you want CNI? Trinity.
Yep, CNI met on March 21st at 5 p.m. Here, and we discussed very routine things: approval of out-of-district travel, student trips, student-teacher clinical practices, before and after school supplemental support, district summer program. We discussed approval of discarding some out-of-date textbooks, approval of a teacher recognition for the NEL, the National Educational Leadership Preparation. We again discussed the policy of entrance age, and tonight is the second and final read of that. Approval of submission of a school climate change pilot grant award. Also approval of supplemental pay for teachers grading placement exams. Approval of some home instruction, approval of student placements, independent avowals, related services providers, ARC of New Jersey agreement, and location more, the ever-growing list of community-based instruction. Under new business, we talked about, and this was actually pretty cool, the seal of biliteracy. So we have 25 juniors and 25 seniors in seven different languages being nationally recognized with their high school diploma that they are speaking more than one language. So it's a big process. And, right now we have, like I said, 25 juniors and 25 seniors. So it's fantastic. And we also looked at the job description for the new licensed clinician therapists that we're hoping to be transitioning services from the Rutgers school-based to bringing those clinicians in-house. And under old business, we discussed the final opt-in and opt-out numbers for the health curriculum that was new this year. And that was it. Any questions?
Thank you, Kim. Kim, on the license, bringing that in-house, was that a combination of a financial thought and also doing better for the students? Because then
Yeah,
they can have a better
so-
relationship with,
So, well, we actually are saving money by bringing them
I
in-house.
figured that, right?
So, yeah, what we were paying them is far exceeding what by bringing them in-house, what we will do. And also, it's just in our opinion, just better for the, better for the kids to just have, them in-house.
Yeah. Terrence, on personnel?
Yes, Board President and Board, the Labor Personnel Negotiations Personnel Agenda Notes. Don't mind me, I'm going to read to make sure I'm accurate here. March 23rd, met at 6:30. We went through approval of retirements. One over at Indian Hill School, approval of leaves of absences for a few maternity and medical leaves, and we wish all the folks well. Approval of 2022-2023 school safety data systems. Review the submission of SSDS for Part 1. Part 2 will be submitted in July. Approved various appointments, temporary leaves of absence, typical that are done throughout the year. Approval of extra hours for grading placement home to high school. Extra hours for staff members to grade placement exams. Approval of a salary adjustment. Before and after school approvals for supplemental student support. Approval also of job description for a licensed clinical therapist for the district. And approval of flag football coaches home to high school. We discussed flag football. It's fantastic. They're out there. If we drove in, really great. Approval of power school administrator, sidebar, Schedule B appointments, substitutes, went over the personnel review process, and various administrative items that are an executive nature, and also public advertisement for RFPs. We discussed going out for RFPs for various professional services that will be on file with the Office of the Business Administrator, Board Secretary. And that would conclude the Personnel Committee report unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Terrence.
Thank you.
Eileen, would you like to do budget and finance?
Budget met on March 22nd. The first thing we discussed was the annual comprehensive financial report. And I just again want to thank Mike and his team for doing such a fantastic job. We had a clean audit with no findings or recommendations, and that's something we always want to see. So that was really a job well done. So thank you. That is item number 36 on tonight's agenda. We also discussed the Bone Crawford House and the applicable feasibility study. The committee agreed this project will be on hold until there's some further discussion with the township. We discussed the multipurpose turf field, in which case the ADA access pathway, foul ball netting, and fencing has all been completed. We discussed two donations, which is items 37 and 38 on the agenda. The first one is a non-monetary donation made by HYAA for a new scoreboard for the multi-purpose turf field. So thank you to HYAA for donating those funds. And the second is to the Holmdel PTSO for art-related supplies. Thank you to them as well. We discussed the 23-24 budget. It has been submitted to the county for approval, and Dr. Cascone and Mr. Patrizza will be presenting that at the public hearing on May 3rd. Kim covered the grant award. That's item 10 on the agenda for the climate change pilot grant. We discussed non-public school aid, which is agenda item 39. And we are moving to a committee of a whole in April. So our next meeting will be April 19th. Any questions?
Thank you, Eileen. Sarika, Buildings and Grounds. I'm sure it's some repetitive, but shoot.
Most of the topics were really similar to the budget committee. So we covered the Brown Crawford House, multipurpose turf field, and the non-monetary donation by HYA, as she covered. And the budget update, again, the same as what Eileen said. And we went over the committee of the whole discussion with the timelines. We went over some suggestions regarding rules of engagement, such as possibly having a time limit for even board members while they're speaking, in order to be efficient during the committee of the whole meeting, and some speaking guidelines. And the next date and time was April 19 with the committee of the whole. And I want to thank Mike as well for an efficient budget with no errors.
Thank you, Sarika. Any questions, buildings and grounds? Kim, I see your
Not a
mic is on.
question, but a comment
Comment?
that I was at the first home scrimmage at the backfields where I took a walk around and saw all the new netting and fencing for boys baseball, and the multi-purpose field having the poles and netting, and the softball field having all fencing, and it just looks fantastic. So looks great.
I make just a brief comment on that. I just want to be sure, and I believe it is the case, that there's equal access for girls' sports as well as boys' sports, not dominated by one group or another. That's a field for everyone. And it's not to invoke Title IX, it's just to make sure that we are ensuring that there's fair play for girls' sports and boys' sports as well. I just want to.
So, yeah,
put
well,
that
the
out there.
other, when I was up there, it was the girls' flag football
Right,
team
that's awesome.
using the multi-purpose field.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to share that. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, I would say, I think Mr. Reynes has a very busy job scheduling all these teams, in the 3 different seasons. Brings us to questions or comments from public on action items only. So if the HYAA folks wanted to talk about resolution number 37, this would be a good time. Oh, if you could state your name and address, please. Thank you.
Sure. Michael Flaherty, 10 Ardmore Place. Pete, thanks for the opportunity to say a few words tonight on behalf of the HYA board, which includes Kim, Joe Crowley, and Danielle Longyear, and myself, on behalf of the HYA commissioners, coaches, parents, and kids. We want to thank you for all the effort that went into putting in the new turf field. From the board to everyone else who was involved, we fully appreciate it. A lot of effort, and actually for many years, the idea of a new turf field has been discussed, and it's just great to see it built. It's great to see it in use, and we are fully appreciated of that. Special couple of special thanks as well to Kim, who played a leading role within our organization for this, and also to Joe, who is our treasurer, who worked very diligently to make sure we had the right the funding in place and the funding ready to support what is really kind of a small part of this facility, but an important one. And the last thing I'll say is that HYA continues to look forward to working with the district, whether it's gyms, whether it's fields, and all the various areas that we overlap. It's been a great collaboration, at least since we started, and we appreciate everything that the district, including what Jeff does and his work with us. Finally, I'll say it was great to see that the SATs team that was honored tonight, every single player is either a current or former HYAA athlete. So with that, thanks very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Couldn't agree more. I think it's great for all the kids that are going to come and the kids that are here now. I mean, obviously this town had one turf field, Rogie Field, for a long, long time. And I've been to a bunch of town meetings over the years, and, it took a mob of people to get it, that constantly did it, and, previous boards and this board getting this field done. So credit to the superintendent, administration, everyone else involved. I'm excited for those kids to have another field to play on. And I think it's a really good thing and a very necessary thing in this day and age. So thank you very much. All right. So Anyone need anyone resolutions? We were gonna vote on 1 through 17, 19 through 36. And then 39 through 41. So basically pulling items number 18, number 37, which we just discussed, and number 38. Are there any other items anyone else wants to pull and discuss? Oh, okay. Item number, and we will add number 41 to that as well. So the items we're going to pull one more time, are items 18, 37, 38, 41. So with that, can we get a resolution for items 1 through 17, 19 through 36, 39 and 40?
Move.
Can we get a second? Thank you. Roll call, Mike?
Mr. Reddy,
Yes.
Mr. Wall,
Yes.
Mrs. Bramante,
A no on item 1 and a yes to the rest.
Mrs. Zhang,
No to number 1 and number 17, item C. Yes to the rest.
Dr. Clore,
Yes to all except number 1.
Just for clarity, just so I understand, Board President, is that the approval of closed executive session minutes or am I misunderstanding?
Yes.
Okay.
Mrs. Tassilo,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley,
Yes.
Mrs. Damari,
I just need to comment on 17C, which we spoke about in the session. Because by law, this doesn't fit the state's definition of a HIB. Administration did follow the right steps here by law in this decision. But publicly, I just wanted to state that with this being said, I don't entirely agree with how the state defines the HIB and the process that follows. With that being said, I'm a yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. John, would you mind reading number 18?
Acceptance of retirement elementary science teacher, Indian Hill. Whereas Ms. Kathleen Bradley has served the Holmdel Township Public Schools with distinction since September 1, 1998. And whereas Ms. Bradley has faithfully executed her duties with skill and competency, and whereas Ms. Bradley has earned the respect of her colleagues and community residents, and whereas Ms. Bradley has submitted a letter announcing her retirement from the Holmdel Township School District effective July 1, 2023. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Holmdel Township Board of Education accepts Ms. Bradley's retirement with deep gratitude for Ms. Bradley's dedication, loyalty, and outstanding services performed, and further extend to Ms. Bradley its best wishes for a happy and healthy retirement.
Thank you. Can I get a motion?
Move.
Second. Roll call.
Mr. Reddy,
Yes, thank you for 25 years of service and congratulations.
Mr. Wall,
Yes, congratulations. Best of luck.
Mrs. Bramante,
Yes, congratulations.
Mrs. Zhang,
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Clore,
Yes, congratulations.
Mrs. Tassilo,
Yes, and congratulations.
Mr. Buckley,
Yes, thank you for your service.
Mr. Damari,
Yes, thank you.
motion passes. Congratulations.
Kim, would you mind reading number 37?
Be my honor. Thank you. Acceptance of the non-monetary donation from the HYAA, that the board accept with gratitude a non-monetary donation from the Holmdel Youth Activities Association of a scoreboard for the new multipurpose field at an estimate cost not to exceed $14,000.
Thank you. Could we get a motion?
Move.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Reddy,
Yes, much appreciated. Thank you.
Mr. Wall,
Yes, thank you very, very much.
Mrs. Bramante,
Yes, thank you.
Mrs. Zhang,
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Kalora,
Yes, thank you very much.
Mrs. Tasillo,
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Buckley,
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Damari.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Sarika, would you mind reading number 38, please?
Acceptance of non-monetary donation from the Holmdel High School PTSO. It was resolved that the board accept with gratitude a non-monetary donation from the Holmdel High School PTSO of 15 canvases and 20 black mat frames to display artwork at a cost not to exceed $240.
Thank you. Can we have a motion?
Move.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mr. Reddy,
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Wall,
Yes, thank you.
Mrs. Bramante,
Yes, thank you.
Mrs. Zhang,
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Kalora,
Yes, thank you.
Mrs. Tasillo,
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Buckley,
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Damari.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 41, approval of bills payment, March 29, 2023. Resolved that the board approve payment of March 29, 2023 regular bills list in the amount of $1,748,600.99 as certified and approved. So I guess we would have a discussion or motion. Yeah.
Move.
We get a second? Any discussion? Mr. Wall?
Thank you, Board President. I have a brief item. This regards the invoice for a David D'Amico. He's not a staff member. He is a outside vendor, outside the county vendor that was not approved in advance by the Board of Ed. This relates to an assembly. The bill, I guess, sat for a few months. This was an assembly that was very controversial in the SATS school. But the issue that I briefly want to state as to why I'm voting no on this invoice is I think honesty matters. It's got to start somewhere. My appraisal of this data, and to the best of my knowledge and belief, is that this fellow manipulated the students in regards to a certain cohort of students that were in the assembly, specifically having the group at large in this public assembly essentially malign and bully a cohort within the group. And so for that reason, I think that a payment is not due. I thought at one point it would not come back up, but it is on the bill list. And specifically, it had the group, and this is verified through multiple sources to the best of my knowledge and belief, have the group say yes when he asked the question if anyone was ever involved in an HIB. Now, by the way, it wasn't, as I understand, whether sustained or unsustained, but that you'll never get a job. So for that young boy or girl to hear from someone with a power differential that you won't get a job, and that individual is allowed in this school to have a group malign another group where everyone's supposed to be welcome. Okay, if we're going to mean that, then my view is that we're not cutting a check for $500 for a vendor who really defaulted on the promise to come to this district. So that's the reason why. Within the body of that assembly, I'm sure that there were very good pieces of information about being welcoming to others and treating everyone fair. And that's absolutely not the point. When you have a group of students chant yes to the question of, will you get a job when you're older? And that group says no, unknowingly. I want to, in fairness to the students, I think they were manipulated, unknowingly maligns that cohort. You absolutely have lost your ability to work as a vendor in this district, I think, and you frankly lost your ability to get paid, in my view. So that's the specific reason, to the best of my knowledge and ability, based on all the information that I understand is corroborated, that to me was a default in the promise that when you get in front of the children that we are responsible for, you have an obligation to be honest. And that was not the case here, based on my knowledge and belief. And that's why I'm voting no to this invoice. And that's what I want to share with you tonight. Thank you.
Was that confirmed that the speaker misled and there was some miscommunication with the, and
Yeah,
did we do a follow-up? with the
I just
speaker?
left it to the best of my knowledge and belief. The Mr. Green made a presentation about staff. I specifically asked about vendors. It's a different relationship, but I want to be
Did we
thoughtful
follow,
in my.
did we follow up with the speaker?
We can't discuss that right now. You know, that's.
I just want to
table
stay
it
within in my lane, but I want to make sure that the public understands why I'm voting no on this bill.
Thank you, Terrence.
Can I make a comment about assembly speakers as a board to discuss right now?
Not at this point.
Okay,
Under
when would
new
I do
business
that?
is probably more appropriate,
Okay.
which is fine. So right now, any other comments on item number 41? I see none.
I think I'm
sorry,
going to
go-
be, I think the reason I'll be voting yes on that is because I think after taking services from somebody, after screening and taking services, it's probably not a good idea to not pay. And if there's any conflict, we can resolve it or do a better job of screening in future.
Thank you. Okay, roll call, Mike?
Mr. Reddy,
Yeah, I'm a yes, thank you.
Mr. Wall,
Yes on all except no on David D'Amico. Thank you.
Mrs. Brio,
Yes.
Mrs. Zhang,
Yes.
Dr. Kalora.
Yes.
Mrs. Tassilo,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley,
Yes.
Mr. Damari,
Yes to all. I'm a no on 23-1905 invoice.
motion passes.
Thank you. Brings us up to old business. Any board members have any old business? Eileen down? at the
Yeah.
end.
So I think perhaps it might have been discussed briefly in CNI, but I'm wondering if we could have follow-up perhaps at the next board meeting about the NJ GPA results. So we have a class of students that are graduating shortly within the next couple of months. And the NJ GPA test results showed that 50% of our students were not prepared in the category of English, and 80% and 20% were not prepared in the category of math. And I was wondering if we can have some follow-up on what we did to remediate those students, especially with the larger number in English. And was that something that, we had a game plan for those students? And, how did we address perhaps those deficits that might have been there?
So I just, as being there when it was discussed, just so you know, that test, it's been found to be faulty and is now being discontinued because of that. So the results are not, my understanding is that the results are not necessarily to be trusted because the state themselves now know that it is faulty and therefore have discontinued it. That being said, we did discuss kind of what we are doing, so we can get that presented out further, but that was what was given to us as far as those results.
Was
So-
this,
No. So I was just curious who deemed them faulty, like.
I'm happy to answer that. Thank you, Ms. Primonte. So I was extremely troubled when the state, in advance of us being directed by the state to share those results, in that same memorandum that the state had deemed the results of that test invalid and unreliable by virtue of the data they had collected, from the performance data. And Holmdel was not alone in the fact that the performance of our students on that was incongruous with other measures of our students' achievement in those areas, whether that's the NJSLA, whether that is APs, whether that's SAT, whatever the case may be, there was a disconnect there right now. Now, when we shared those results with the community, we did so reluctantly, quite frankly, because we did not want to unnecessarily alarm our community that 50% of our students are not college ready, when 96% of our students go to four-year colleges and 85% of them graduate within 4 years, which is almost 3 times the national average. Something is clearly not accurate about data that says 50% of our students are not college ready in English math when 85% of them are finishing in 4 years and getting in. Clear problems with the data. So it was very troubled to have to share that data because I knew that it would create a misconception within the parent perception about the quality and the performance of the school district and the students. That being said, We triangulated that data with our internal benchmarks, whether that be Linkit or our class grades. And we're tracking student performance always as it really, this district made a great commitment prior to when I got here to introducing the Linkit assessment so that we were collecting normed assessment data, standards-based assessment data on our students multiple times a year. But we certainly can speak more about, how we're addressing the needs of students who are not achieving at level, whether that be evidenced by the NJP, GPA or other tests.
I have a question. So maybe I do not understand clearly what we are talking about. So you are talking about last meeting, the presentation we presented here,
No.
or which one?
It was a
Right,
few
not-
So this, we were, the NJGPA is, and actually it was administered again this year. It'd be interesting to see how those two data sets compare, but this was the NJGPA from last year. It was basically the pilot year for that test in New Jersey. That test, truthfully and transparently, we did not present those results with any great fanfare, if I might be completely honest. We did share them with the community transparently at the time that we had them. And we shared them really intentionally in an infographic in the context of other student achievement measures, that when you look at those side by side, you're thinking to yourself, well, gee, 85% of our kids take the SAT, and our SATs are typically above 1220 and exceed the state average. So how is it that our students are getting 1220 or 1240 on average on the SAT, but are not passing a minimum basic skills proficiency state test? It just doesn't make sense, right? So, but that's what Dr. Irwin presented was our internal Linkit and MAP data, which is the assessments that we administer multiple times a year to see how our students are measuring up against the standards for that grade level in that course.
So the information Eileen mentioned, or we never shared with the community.
We did. We shared it
shared
in
with the
writing
CNI
with the
committee.
community, and it was obviously shared with the board as well. But it was shared just in the form of basically let's call it a memorandum of sorts, presenting that data.
Okay,
But
so I'm more confused now. We shared it here, right?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yes, we emailed it out to parents. I linked it in my weekly update.
Do they know right now? You said that's a mistake. We just get the information from the state. This
Well,
whatever they did is wrong.
we didn't, I didn't go into great detail at the time of communicating that, bashing the state for their faulty test. But I just simply, we simply presented the data in the context of other student achievement data from the high school so that people could see it side by side with other measurements of student achievement in those areas. And so they could draw their own conclusions and say, because if we just sent it out singularly without those things, like, what is this? Holmdel High School, 50% of our kids are graduation ready in English. Well, you look at that data point and then look at some of the other data points we have.
Yeah.
And hold them
And that-
side by side and draw your own conclusions, right?
So when they see that, they may have the questions, right? Now you get the confirmation from the state, the data is wrong.
Yeah.
right.
I didn't get any questions. No, there was no one, and whether or not the approach of sort of couching it with those other student achievement measures was effective, or maybe people weren't necessarily locked in on it, but regardless of what it was, in the wake of that communication to the parent community, I didn't receive a single email or concern about the data.
Oh, I see, because that's the first time I know that's totally confirmed wrong data. So
Yeah.
because next year when we come back, okay, we can see those data are definitely wrong. It's not a guess.
That's
or
true.
not a- Yeah.
We'll
so-
have a second point. We'll
Yeah,
have
yeah.
another data point to
Yeah,
compare.
so now we know it's not a we are guessing it's wrong, it's confirmed it's wrong data.
Provided they've corrected their assessment.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, did the state agree that it was wrong or
Yes.
it's just our, okay.
They,
all
they,
right,
they,
you said
they
that,
expressed that in writing.
All right.
In other words, they were not going to be using that as far as the accountability measures for school districts. they weren't holding school districts accountable for it, other than actually just communicating it to their constituencies.
So is the state going to give back refunds to all those districts that took the tests that had erroneous data?
Negative.
You don't have to answer that.
I think that's
The
probably.
bigger question would be, is there word or when, like, this is a mandated test we have to take? Obviously, some people, what would you say, credibility, integrity, they're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna take this test again next year. Is it already set? They're gonna reformat it, or are they just scrapping it like they did?
Well, we just went through the second year of administration at the high school, maybe two
Right.
weeks,
Yeah,
2
yeah,
weeks
yeah,
ago.
exactly.
And again, they'll of course look at the results. It was through their analysis of the results that they rendered it unreliable and invalid. And I'm assuming they did similar to what we did, which was like, how is a school district that has average SATs of 1220, 50% graduation ready? And I'm sure that occurred similarly in in the Princetons and the Milburns and the Chathams of the world had probably similar results. And it was by virtue of that they said something's not right here, because more than 50% of these kids are college ready. So.
Thank you. I remember years ago, I don't know what test it was, but I remember Mr. Logren, I think, was presenting for the high school, and he was talking about like, oh yeah, these results are almost saying a lot of our kids can't read, and obviously couldn't been further from the truth. So, I mean, it sounds like this has happened a couple of times over the years, so hopefully they can fix their ways or errors. So thank you for the
And it's
comments.
just a bit more editorialization. Sorry, this is another example of the state. Our community holds our schools accountable for our performance. That's evidenced by some of the steps that were taken before I got here. Okay. The state fancies itself as the ombudsman for all school districts. And if they weren't do it, we wouldn't be, so at the end of the day, we hold ourselves accountable through our own internal mechanisms, our own internal tests. And these are just come with the territory, something that we must do. It's not to say that in some cases the data is not helpful. It is, because it represents another data point that we can triangulate with our own data. But this particular test was scrapped because they determined their own assessment to be unreliable and invalid.
Thank you. Any new business?
Yes.
Christopher.
I think it's important for us as a board to communicate about anybody outside of our internal staff coming in and speaking with our children directly. This isn't to target any specific assembly speaker or anything like that, but we're here for our community, and these are discussions that go around our community. So we're the board members that were elected. So I just wanted to share my thoughts, my personal opinions, and I'm open for discussion. But I do not recommend inviting anyone into our schools to share their opinions or ideologies on a subject matter that our country is clearly divided on. And if we do happen to do that, there should be another speaker that provides the opposing perspective for our children to understand that there's both views to a lot of these discussions, and the children can make their decisions based on what they have heard. This will teach them how to respectfully debate the subject matter. It will truly educate our children on dealing with the real world ahead. Many families feel that a lot of these discussions are against their family values or their perspectives. And I'm seeing that they're proven to become disruptions, and they're creating conflicts within our community. So I feel the Board of Ed should be playing a bigger role in the approval of anybody from outside our internal staff that are going to be communicating directly with our children. I mean, we're board members. These are our children. We're the parents. We're Holmdel residents. We're taxpayers. And along with our community, we should be part of the process of deciding who communicates with our children outside of the internal staff. And these are things that we've discussed. I put that out there to the board. Some of this stuff we can debate. Some of these speakers or utilizing an outsourced vendor like High Tops to write the sex ed curriculum. They might violate our controversial issues policy, which is district policy 2240, because a lot of the stuff people do view as prejudiced discussions. So I think it's important for us to discuss that further. We could certainly debate that, whoever is willing to speak on that. But to be clear, where I stand as a board member, to share this publicly with the community, is I support and believe in our incredible teachers and staff. We have some phenomenal people here that have done so many positive things in our district for our students and an administration that's clearly working hard together to make Holmdel schools better and help our children grow. So I applaud you there. But for anyone coming in to speak to our children about their views on an extremely divided topic, whether it's an assembly, I mentioned high tops material, or a book where we could choose many other books to mitigate creating distractions for our students. I think that's very important for us to discuss more as a board, what's coming in, who's coming in. And to end this, I just want to note that my personal opinion is I just don't think the schools need to take a responsibility in engaging with the culture wars that are going on in our society that have clearly split our nation. And that's it. If anybody wants to add to that, I'm willing to talk on that. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I'll if I may. Yeah. Thank you for that, Mr. Damari. Just want to provide a few thoughts, obviously, because, you know, as the chief school administrator, you know, these things are my responsibility, right? So, and their responsibilities to take very seriously. In this day and age, you know, walking the balance between ensuring that I'm keeping the board in good standing, you know, as a board of education of a public school district with regard to the mandates, and at the same time trying to chart a course that is as palatable to the entire community. A course that that divides, maybe not at all, but certainly as little as possible. When I arrived in Holmdel, though these standards had been, the health standards had been revised and were due for implementation in 2020, there had been no preparatory work done for that when I arrived in March. At the time, we had an interim, you know, C&I overseer. And so when our new curriculum director started in July, we had a full health rewrite to be done, and there had been no work or research or preparation done whatsoever to get that done. And so we were under a bit of a time constraint there. I can tell you that some of this material is obviously very new. It's material that none of our health education teachers have ever taught. I can tell you that none of them felt particularly comfortable, you know, broaching these topics without some degree of training first. And so, so we did go with an option for our pullout assemblies using an outside provider. That was the course we took this year in trying to find a path forward, right? Two principles which I really felt strongly about employing is that, you know, to be as transparent as possible, right? So in other words, you know, parents have detailed access to everything, you know, in making their decisions. And I can tell you that when you look around, and, you know, there are very few districts around, some of which are doing it internally. But when you go and review their curriculum, there is not nearly as much detail. So at the end of the day, people are either signing on to something or not signing on to something, and they don't really know when it's being instructed by a staff member internally exactly what's happening in that school district. And there may not necessarily be consistency from one teacher to the next. So this was the path we took this year: complete transparency and choice. Moving into next year, I think we add a piece. We'll continue to be transparent. We'll continue to offer choice, but we will move towards a local approach, right? And we've talked about that. And I've shared with the board that next year, and I think our teachers now are at a point where they do feel more comfortable and confident to do it, where we can put our local lens on it. Local lens on it, and try and come up with a program that, listen, I don't think it's ever going to be something that we get 100% buy-in to, because the reality of it is that these standards and the topics that are covered, I don't think there's really, in some folks' mind, and I respect their opinions, I don't think there's an uncontroversial way in some folks' minds to broach these topics. that exist within the standards and the mandates. Final piece, Mr. Demari. Following, the assembly, which Mr. Wall referenced, I think that, and I mentioned, I think when some folks here came to speak about it, it was a learning opportunity for me as a superintendent, for our administration, for the district, in terms of really thinking about the processes that we use to vet and approve speakers. And so following that now has become standard operating for, any outside speakers, one, to be run through the curriculum committee, which now of course be committee of the whole starting in April, and then to actually be on a board agenda for approval, so that the board will have an opportunity to weigh in on any speaker that the district might, the administration might recommend to come in. So I do think that some of these trials and tribulations have led to some growth and some positive changes. We are going to continue to try and find a middle way forward the best we can.
Thank you for all that. And I do applaud the administration and staff for the transparency that you've offered the community. I've certainly recognized that, and that's important. I didn't realize that you had mentioned just now that the board would get involved with the approval process moving forward. So that's good.
Henceforth.
Thank you.
If I may, Board President, briefly, I want to thank Dr. Cascone for his words, and also Mr. Demari, and also Dr. Koulor in talking about looking forward, procedures moving forward to improve and build and grow. I think that's really important, regardless of what one bill is on a bill list. And what I'm hearing is getting local, staying local with all, and I mentioned this a number of months ago when I expressed my concerns with the vendor and outside vendors in general. Sometimes it's appropriate, but you really have to be thinking it through. I did express my concerns, and just to tie into that, the prior vendor, honesty matters a lot. Just be honest. You may believe A, B, or C, but be honest about it. There were 3 prongs that I had concerns with on high tops that maybe perhaps it could be tighter whenever, I think the presentation is tomorrow. Or whenever that, I think it's tomorrow, right? Okay. There are several things that jumped out. I watched the presentation that was, I think, for parents, and being honest and factual, I thought is really important, regardless of where you land on the belief stream. He referenced, and this is from the video, referenced that you need to use appropriate and kind language, and not using, for example, that being trans as an example is a phase. But then he looked at the camera and I think he put his hand to his mouth and said, but it can be a phase. Well, the relevance there is significant when there's gender reassignment surgery, where there are arguments to be made where young boys and girls should have their genitals removed. And so in the event that, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a medical doctor, but I just know that if you have gender surgery, it's forever. If you have your ovaries removed, they're gone. So it's important to me that this group is honest. So when you say, don't use, words like it might be a phase, and then you say to the camera, but it might be a phase, I have an issue with that from being candid. Additionally, there were a number of different genders described, genders that I had never heard before. Okay. But then after you redefine what straight means, completely out of whole cloth, and this just gets to being honest. We have dictionaries in the library for a reason. Then you say there are no concrete definitions. And I asked, I said, is that not confusing to the children? Which he had tremendous difficulty answering, the representative. And so that was prong number 2. And then the third one that I think was just important was, regardless of what one's position is on pronouns, putting that aside, again, being honest, we are told to essentially, sustainability is where I'm driving to, honesty and sustainability. We are then to track pronouns and understand what they are and when they change from day to day. It is impossible to not end up offending people on a regular basis, because it is impossible to daily track what one identifies on every particular day. But the lesson from this fellow was that we are supposed to do that. Otherwise, you have offended someone by misgendering them because you're not tracking it literally on a daily basis, if you watch the video. So those were 3 items that I found galling and unsustainable as a society, regardless of where one stands. One has to do with genital mutilation. The other has to do with being able to track what one feels and honoring what one feels. That's not the discussion now. But as far as sustainability and practicality, and just being honest, and that's what I asked from when we have an outside vendor here, and that's why I voted no on that bill list. And I hope that this organization, they may be honest, they may have gotten some feedback, because I was very candid with the district of just being honest. And that word has to matter. So I think getting local, staying local, we have so many talented staff here. And now that, you know, they're being more immersed in that type of dynamic and learning, that it can be a local solution moving forward with all the folks that work here. Thank you, Board President.
Thank you, Terrence. Just to wrap it up, I think I would say everyone's opinions matter. I think one good thing that came out of this was, hey, we have outside groups coming in to talk to our students, to the kids of this town, making sure we vet them, making sure we have the ground rules, screening presentations, all those things. Because it does, you know, there are people out there, like there's a ton of different groups. So as long as we, you know, and I think it's important to hear both sides. I was like, I'm a huge believer in, I don't know everything by far. I love to learn and see other opinions, because how do I know what's right, not right? And it helps me develop as a person. So I appreciate at least, you know, hey, we're making things better and putting a lens on it, and talking is good. I think not talking about it is an issue. Sarika?
Yeah, I have a couple of things. Even about the speaker, we had received some emails from some families saying that they did appreciate some of the content. So I just want to point out that nothing is all bad or all good. And they did have some good takeaway points, and we got emails from them. Secondly, I did not watch the video, but did he really mention genital mutilation and surgery to get ovaries removed? Did he make that statement? I'm not aware of it.
He did not make the statement about gender reassignment surgery.
Okay.
He did state that it can be a phase. And so
is that a conjecture from the genital
if you're
surgery?
if he's stating that it can be a phase, if you have gender reassignment surgery during that phase and you come out of that phase, you're not coming out of the phase of the reassignment surgery. But I think, thank you for asking that. No, he did not say that, but it's the natural extension of the conversation.
Right, that's just a natural, but I mean, I would be surprised if he used those words in the assembly. That's why I was wondering. And the other thing is about screening candidates, me as a board member screening these candidates. I'm not sure if I'm well equipped to do that, better equipped than the administration, because we need to do a background check, we need to research, we need to look at their handouts. I'm not sure if I can do as good a job as the administration. And despite doing all that, it's possible that people don't read off prepared material and they might go off the cuff and say something. So there's always some room for some statement that some people inaccurate in this case, as you pointed out, although I didn't hear the video, but you know, I've heard it from you. And so despite us screening, looking at the handout, there's still a possibility that there's a statement that we do not like. So that's the chance we have to take and going forward. And lastly, it's always good to have, no matter what it is, it's good to have controversial topics discussed, because we're talking about reducing bullying as one of our missions. And bullying is essentially inability to accept differences. And here we are, you know, whatever the differences may be, differences in our opinions or differences in gender or beliefs or faith, it's good for children to be open-minded, because this is the age to be open-minded and empathetic. So it's a good thing to have controversial topics and not the just same topics that everybody agrees on.
I just want to wrap it up. Thank you for that. I did talk to both sides about that assembly speaker. That's not my concern. I just feel like that's the problem. It creates conflict because there are two sides to this, and it's not good for the students. We need to focus on getting them competitive in math and science and all that other stuff that we're you know, these kids just went through two years of dysfunction. Also regarding the bullying and HIB, I'm all for that, inclusiveness and all that. But we did learn from the stats that actually kids are bullied more through religion than through the gender stuff. And we don't have people come in and teach religion to the students also. So that's up for debate. My other comment back is, as a parent, I feel very comfortable deciding who I would want talking to my child, regardless of background checks and anything like that. So I appreciate the dialogue. I think it's very important for us to have, and that's what the community wants. Dr. Cascone, I just wanted to make a reference to our conversation in public so everybody recognizes our discussion in the subcommittee meeting at the CNI. And I know Kim had put it in the minutes. So everybody's aware. My conversation with the subcommittee and administration, one, we brought up the numbers, the updated numbers. I felt like the community there was a little miscommunication on the stats that came out. Out of all the parents eligible through the grades that are affected by this, it had mentioned that 52% of the parents opted in, but it's really 34% of all those parents eligible opted in to the.
But 52% of those that responded.
52% that responded, 20-something8% of parents did not respond, which means they did not opt in. So overall, all the children eligible, 34% of the children opted in. My other discussion was, just felt that, I've communicated with a lot of neighboring districts. Every one of them I spoke to has done this in-house. And I just was wondering why Holmdel didn't. And Dr. Cascone had mentioned that, but I think it's important that in the minutes, it mentions parental choice from some of the members who had debated or disagreed. To me, this has nothing to do with parental choice. I'm not trying to pull parental choice. I'm not trying to pull the sex ed. I'm just trying to keep it in-house, keep Holmdel. In my eyes, Holmdel is supposed to be the model for other districts. They're supposed to look up to us. We shouldn't be going outside to other districts or other vendors for them to come in and show us how to do things. That's just, I've lived in Holmdel my whole life. I have a lot of pride for Holmdel. And I want to continue to strengthen our brand. The schools are the backbone of this town, and that's very important to me. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. All right. Brings us to new business, or actually questions and comments from the public. So thank you all for waiting till 10:15. That's 3 hours and 15 minutes. So much appreciated. So if you have anything to say, please come to the mic, name and address, and be more than happy to listen.
Good evening. My name is Sean O'Connor. I live at 10 Spring Valley Drive. Yeah, part of what I'm going to say tonight, I think in this discussion just kind of stirred this thought. I think there's a lane, right? There's a clear lane that's defined of what we expect from our schools, right? Administrators, the board, the superintendent, the heads of curriculum. And it just feels like by day that lane just extends, and there's constantly a grab to feel the need to instruct, to put materials in front of our kids that just, Chris, you said it, right? It's science, it's math. I think it's things like that. And it's kind of the purpose of why I'm up here to talk. First, I do want to, a positive, I do want to commend the internet safety training. I wasn't there, but I did watch it. I do appreciate the fact that you put it out there for a week for us to view it. I thought it was really helpful. I thought the content was great. So thank you for that. So a few meetings ago, I did speak to the board about a piece of literature in our curriculum called The Hate You Give. I did not have specifics with me at the time, but I explained the sexual content, the racial themes, and inappropriate content the book contained. 2 years ago, my wife complained to the administration about the book that our then 8th grader was reading. And at that time, it was agreed that it would be removed from the book list. I have not been able to confirm this, and I would ask for an answer on this, not tonight, but at some point, if that book is in fact back on the list. I'd heard it was, but I can't confirm that. So if you go to the ALA, which is the American Library Association's website, it lists the top 10 most challenged books. Basically, books that have been challenged because of their content to be removed from the bookshelves and from schools. Number 5 on the list was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, and it's a novel inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement. The reasons stated for why it was removed: it was banned and challenged for profanity, violence, and because it was thought to promote an anti-police message and indoctrination of social agenda. This year, our 8th grade students are reading the number 6 book on the list, which is called The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, and it's authored by Sherman Alexis. And I'm gonna read just a brief excerpt just to get your thoughts. And the author writes in it, and I quote, this is strictly from the book verbatim: "Naked women plus right hand equals happy, happy, joy, joy. Yep, that's right. I admit that I masturbate. I'm proud of it. I'm good at it. I'm ambidextrous. If there were a professional masturbation league, I'd get drafted #1 and make millions of dollars. And maybe you're thinking, the author goes on to say, well, you really shouldn't be talking about masturbation in public. Well, tough. I'm going to talk about it because everybody does it and everybody likes it. And if God hadn't wanted us to masturbate, then God wouldn't have given us thumbs. So I thank God for my thumbs. Now, those are direct quotes from the book. That wasn't uncomfortable to read aloud in front of a group of what I would consider to be mature adults. I debated even reading it because of what I felt was inappropriate language and content to be shared in a public forum. But if I don't sit here and read it, a few things can happen. You guys, the superintendent, the board, the administrators, head of curriculum would not be made to feel uncomfortable. You should feel uncomfortable for sitting here listening to that. If our children cannot read aloud to their parents or peers without shame or embarrassment, something that was assigned to them by their teacher, then maybe we need to be asking the question, what are we including in our curriculum and book list? And does the reward of literature outweigh the content? In this case, I think the answer is the risk far outweighs the reward, and a graphic sexual write-up of masturbation perhaps is inappropriate. Secondly, to the parents here in attendance, of who's left and who's left listening, hope it's a lot, but we need to pay attention to what our children are being taught and given to read. Terrence, you mentioned parent participation. I agree with that. It's a big part of it. The false narrative that our children are in a safe learning environment focused on learning about math, science, reading is a half-truth. The reality is there is inappropriate curriculum and programs designed to indoctrinate and confuse our children. Just recently, my 8th grade son was given an article in literature class to read and answer questions to. The title of the literature was The Value of Being Confused. And in it, it talks about confusion over your identity and quote, your identity can involve being part of groups like race, gender. The first step is exploration, where you try out different groups and see what fits, end of quote. The students were asked to then answer questions on the article, questions such as, quote, have you ever been confused by your identity or gone through a phase that didn't seem true to yourself? And if they aren't comfortable talking about that, then it asks, has a friend ever felt uncomfortable? You know, the old I'm asking for a friend question. It seems relentless, the constant attempts, both obvious as in books and not so obvious as in the literature worksheets. Our children are constantly being presented with inappropriate sexual education now, books referencing racism, sexual content, and drug content, as well as worksheets asking them if they are sure about their race and gender identity. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. If the school is not going to proactively correct this, parents need to speak up and make these board meetings the place where their voice is heard and where our children's safety is made the priority. Now, if I stood up at a meeting in my professional life and I read aloud what I read to you before, it would probably be considered inappropriate behavior and may put me in a precarious position and threaten my employment. But because it's in a book and within a curriculum, we say it's okay for our teenage children to read. I challenge the board to take a more proactive approach to this. From the outside, it seems like it's just more reactive. You know, I did speak about David D'Amico here, and I'm really happy to hear that there was some pushback on it and the screening process has changed. That's great. But from the outside, it seems more reactive, and where a parent like myself complains up here or calls the school to complain, as the board and the superintendent, I challenge you to take a standing. We got to get ahead of this. If it feels as if parents are tasked with being the filter, and if one, we don't catch it, or two, we do catch it, but we don't feel comfortable saying something to the administration, the superintendent, and the board, then our children are left to suffer. I do not expect you to respond to me here tonight. But inside, you may be saying, okay, we agree with this, it's inappropriate, or we get it, but it's not a big deal. Or for one, I do disagree with that. I think it is inappropriate. But secondly, and maybe more importantly, this is just one example. You couple this with the Hate You Give example, that book I mentioned earlier, and others that I am confident are out there in our curriculum, and it becomes, again, that death by 1,000 cuts to our children. We are slowly chipping away at our preteen and teenager children's with literature they are just not mature enough to comprehend, and that a preteen and teenagers can do so much more harm than good. There are people employed by this district whose salaries are paid by taxpayer dollars, whose job it is to select appropriate curriculum and materials for our children. This is another example of the failure to do your job, and a failure on the part of the elected officials on the board and Dr. Cascone to act on these failures and correct them. People in the role of curriculum selection and literature selection need to be held accountable. I debated even coming here tonight. I'll be honest with you guys. I have 4 sons that we live in Holmdel, grades 4, 6, 8, and 10. My wife and I made the decision this past year to pull 2 of our youngest from the Holmdel system. We just felt the system was failing them. We did keep the older 2 in Holmdel schools, thinking perhaps they were old enough and mature enough to handle the discussion of sex education, navigate through critical race theory, gender identity, and other topics. But then this book comes up and it's brought to our attention, and in complete transparency, we didn't even find this book. It got through us. My son read it in the first or second marking period this year. This book was brought to our attention by a close friend in the district who also has a child in the 8th grade. I read this and I think maybe we're headed out of the district with the older 2 as well. Holmdel is exposed to the same downward spiral we're seeing across the country, and it has infiltrated our schools. I did decide to speak tonight. My children and our friends' children are too important. They're the leaders of tomorrow. They need an advocate and a voice. So that's why I'm chose to come up here tonight and speak. I hope and encourage others to do the same. This wasn't personal against any of you, but I will hold you all accountable. Curriculum heads, superintendents, and if you continue to ignore it, I'll continue to wait. I'll come up here every time and I'll speak about it. And I'm happy to see that there was some change from that. You mentioned the screening process, and I think that's great. I just wish we'd stay in our lane. Like, just focus on the stuff that is so important to our kids, the math, the science, the reading, and just get this garbage out. There's no place for it. So with that, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I can tell you this board takes them to heart. I know the administration takes it to heart, and listen, it's just not, so thank you again. Please.
Hi, everyone. Kristen Barber, 19 Red Coaches Lane. Just going back to the assemblies, I want to ask, are they going forward going to be videotaped? So there's no controversy like, oh, my child came home and said this, but that wasn't the message. Like, are they going to be videotaped?
I think there's a strong likelihood that the district is going to, the speakers that we bring into the district are going to be extremely limited, because speakers who generally charge and have proprietary material, generally speaking, that's not something that they're willing to do. In the case of Clayton Cranford, he was willing to put it up for a week. But that's, there are some vendors for that where that's a non-starter, and maybe if it's a non-starter, then we don't want them here. But
Exactly.
but we're really reevaluating, our, just the material, the assemblies. To be honest with you, and I would tend to agree with Mr. Wall, is that, we have some really talented people here, and we can put together our own things. There might be, in some cases, we've had some really great outside speakers who've been really dynamic, and I think it would be a shame to not have them here that haven't been remotely controversial. And I'd like to think that we can still continue to do that. But I think some of this content that sometimes we contract out, we could do just as well ourselves.
No, absolutely. And now, so before I keep going, the high tops that we hired for 1 year, how much did that cost the district to hire?
There were, I believe it was about $5,000, which included about 23 student sessions, 3 parent workshops, and 1 staff training.
And was that board approved, or is that just by the, the curriculum director and every?
So there, it did not appear on an agenda, but the vendor as well as the proposal were run through the curriculum committee, the board curriculum committee. And in fact, some of the feedback that we received from the board curriculum committee was actually considered and ultimately, influenced the ultimate proposal. So while it was not on a board agenda, the board was not divorced from any knowledge or information pertaining to the proposal, but it was never put to a board vote per se.
Okay. And Pete, you mentioned like both ends of the spectrum. Now this high tops group, I know that they're going to educate the kids on trans and all that other stuff. Now, Chris made a great point of educating kids on both ends of the subject. Is there going to be somebody there that represents High Tops that's going to say, you know what, I've had this, gender reassignment surgery and I regret it? Like, is there someone doing something, like, show them both that there's both ways? Is there someone in High Tops that does that?
I don't think I'm the person to answer that, and I'll leave it to the superintendent if he'd like to answer that. But I think, the reason they were brought in was to do specific teaching of state mandated training.
I think the, and the danger of engaging in this conversation in this manner at this time is that there's no context, right, to the presentation. So there's been some assertions made, and certainly folks are entitled to their opinion about that. But I think it's important to realize what the primary message of this workshop is, and what it starts with is the idea of just being an affirming community, right? This, and yes, the standards refer to gender identity, right? So if you're gonna address define gender identity, and I know to the chagrin of many, you can't discuss gender identity without discussing pronouns. That's just, you can't discuss gender identity without discussing the various within that spectrum of identities, what comes into that. But in terms of at the end of the day, parents, and I think, and just since we're going to go down this rabbit hole, let's go all the way.
Right.
So the idea of this idea that was mentioned about this kind of slippery slope, the idea of a phase, just to put that in context in the way it was explained. And since he was addressing this to a group of parents, and I think it's important to realize that some of the messaging that was given to a parent group is obviously going to be different from what's given to a student group. So the idea was that to be affirming is when someone tells you this, is not to say, it's a phase, you'll grow out of it. That was a piece of advice. You can subscribe to it, you can do it, you can not do it. It's a recommendation, which is that if somebody tells you, that you say, okay, that it's not, well, this is a phase. But what he was saying to parents was, it might be, right? That in other words, and to me, if I'm a parent, right, there's perhaps, because we know that life can be very difficult for people who are of these different identities. We know that suicide rates tend to be higher amongst people of this demographic. So I think as parents, we don't want our children to live lives of trial and tribulation. So as a parent, I think he was saying to parents, listen, this can be, right? So I think the point in time from when a child or a teenager might come home to a parent and say this, to the point in time where a parent is bringing their child to a surgery center for gender reassignment surgery, I would suggest that that's a pretty wide chasm between that initial first time that a child comes home and says, hey, I think I feel this way. It's like, okay, to the point of where a parent's like saying, yeah, I'll drive you to the gender reassignment surgery. That's a chasm between there. Not to mention, I don't believe those surgeries are even performed in New Jersey before 18. So in terms of having someone come and speak to that, I mean, to me, I think that would be a much more sophisticated topic that would be taught at a much higher grade
I'm
level.
just saying, show both ends of the spectrum. Like, show kids, that have gone through the phase, and then show the kids that have gone through it and regretted it, or the parents that went through it and regretted it. I think they should be, as parents too, should be educated on both.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I think we're in, again, like we're finding our way through this thing as well.
Right.
And so, I don't think it's necessary. Honestly, I don't necessarily think that it's a bad idea. I truly don't. I do think it's important to show both sides.
And now, I know you mentioned like a background check. You didn't feel like you were qualified to, hire or pick somebody to do an assembly. But I was brought to my attention, even though it didn't affect my son, we knew all about the Dave D'Amico. All you had to do was research his name. And his first picture that came up was like him holding some sort of object in like a sexual position, right? So it's like, I would much rather every single one of you go through whoever we're going to hire to speak to our children, whether you feel like you're qualified or not, because maybe you'll be like, you know what, let me look up this guy on Facebook, or, you know, something that slipped through somebody's cracks, somebody finds out. So I agree totally that I think the assembly people should be picked and voted through the whole entire Board of Ed. That's.
Yeah, I can assure you, you know, that this experience has taught us, and really it's my responsibility, that when I bring information to the board shouldn't have to do that. That's my responsibility. And I can assure you that our checks and balances are certainly tighter than they were before.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
I like the comment, if that's okay, Pete.
Not now.
All right, please let me know when I can.
I would
Thank
like to hear his comment. I can't. we
No,
can't.
it's not really an open dialogue. I mean, obviously, you know, it's 3 minutes for everyone like this. You know, normally the comments come, I want to say we appreciate the comments. I personally believe that the back and forth is good. I think we've taken it far enough for right now. I mean, if there's more things you want to discuss, you could probably email the board, reach out to Dr. Cascone. But I think we understood your comments, so thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Brew?
Yes. Debbie Brew, 15 Cindy Lane. I'm just speaking with regard to the guidance presentation, which once again, Mr. Howard killed it. I'm really enjoying your presentations, obviously. I know I get up and say that. I made some notes and I'm not going to read all of them because for sure I'll be on that council as a volunteer. But I do just want to offer some suggestions on the notes that I did make. Power School requirements in the beginning of the year, right? You have to enter your name, update your emergency contacts. I think it would be a good idea there to also, when you're getting your schedules, have your intro to guidance and contact information. Maybe an intro to guidance, like this is what our responsibilities are. This is when we'd like to contact you. This is how you contact us. By the way, I am your guidance counselor. And I think that's helpful for the student and for the parent to both get that information. I also say, I know it might not be you might tell me it's not legal, but I think every survey you need to do or anything that you absolutely want from the parents, you hold those teacher and class assignments hostage, because I'm telling you in August, that's all they want. What day is it coming out? What day am I going to find out? Well, did you go to Power School and fill out your emergency contact, answer these 2 surveys and blah, blah, blah. You'll get so many responses, but I'm very impressed with the 600. I've never seen anything like that. Also, with regard to communication, I mentioned this to Dr. Cascone in our quarterly parent group leader meeting. Use the parent groups for information sharing. They're not utilized enough. There are leaders in the 4 major parent groups that all have access to School Messenger for their entire school. And I'll say it a million times, I thoroughly enjoy your superintendent newsletter and the principal newsletters that go out. But when you have to click on the email and then click on the letter, and then I have to zoom it up so I could see it, I just think in the body of the email is better. But when you're getting an email from your parent group leader, you're thinking that is something specific to your child rather than to the entire district. So I think you pay attention to it a little more. I think when we have these important surveys and things like that, reach out to the parent group leaders. They're here to help and represent their schools, and have them share your surveys and the important information that you want to get out. Another thing is, I think it's sad, all of the large amounts of people that were undecided or didn't know, didn't have an answer. For me, that's a school problem, because I don't know what they do or what they offer, or if they were supposed to help me or not. So it's that communication to me. I think the community and the school are both at fault for a lot of these things together. But my impression always was that, and my children have almost 20 years in the school now. I'm almost coming to the end, don't worry. One more year. But my impression was it was discouraged to go bug your guidance counselors. And, that was something that your student did. Your student met with them, and if there was a problem, then they would reach out to you. So one of my suggestions would be similar to the parent-teacher night appointments, where you can go on and schedule a night. I think it might not be a bad idea to have a week of guidance counselor where you can schedule maybe a little longer. I think those speed dating ones are like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. But maybe you get, 10-minute session and then something you could follow up with in the future, but at least get that face-to-face, maybe feel comfortable with meeting them going forward. And my last thing, because I'll save all my other notes for when we have a meeting, is I think also a couple years ago, Terrence suggested the seniors going out with an exit survey. I think included in the exit survey is, do you want to be involved in this group? Because the recent alumni have the best experience at the application process and what happened this year in college and getting into colleges. And the last couple of years have been nuts with what's going on. And I think it'll be very helpful for the guidance department to also get their feedback on what could we have done to help you better, or what is your experience in the application process, and maybe put out some ideas that the alumni could help. So in the exit survey, would you be willing to help us, and can we contact you to participate in this guidance group? So that's all. Thank you, Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Ms. Brew. One last time around, comments?
Just real
Chris?
quick,
Sure.
I'm confident in saying in our diverse community that we all have a high level of respect for each other and empathy towards each other's differences. And we all want to create as much of an inclusive environment for all. I think we just have disagreements on how to get there. So let's just continue to work together and get to the finish line on this and create the best possible environment for our students. Thank you.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you very much.
And I just want to say that as of February, the plan as far as as pre-approving speakers has already been in place, because in February we had Aaron Gloob on the agenda and, for as a speaker. So it's, we all need to be aware that not only was it already discussed, it's already been put into place as of February. So we're discussing it, but it's already been done.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. We do not need to go into executive session, so can I get a majority to motion adjourn? Yes.
Move.
We are done at 10:40. Thank you very much. Everyone have a good night.